I was lying in bed reading a novel on my phone when everything suddenly went black. When I woke up, my vision was blurry and my ears were filled with strange, sharp sounds. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then a massive shape came into focus in front of me, a huge white beast covered in smooth, shining white scales like ice crystals. It had big bat-like wings and cold, pale yellow eyes staring right at me. The creature was so enormous that just its body looked like a building. I could barely breathe from the pressure. Then a flood of memories rushed into my head all at once. In just a few seconds, I understood everything. I had been reborn as a white dragon hatchling, and this giant beast in front of me was my dragon mother. She was watching me carefully, waiting. I knew from the inherited dragon knowledge that if a newborn dragon can't speak its true name, it means it's just a mindless beast, and the mother will kill it or drive it away. Frost was already puffing from her nostrils, and her eyes were turning dangerous. I quickly spoke my true dragon name, Garen Augustus. Sol Aurelian. The danger in her eyes faded. She closed her eyes and went to sleep. I was hungry, so I ate my broken eggshell. It tasted pretty good, cool, and chocolatey. Dragon eggshells have nutrients that hatchlings need, so it was basically my first meal. After eating, I studied my reflection in my mother's shiny scales. I was about the size of a lion, which is actually bigger than normal white dragon hatchlings. They're usually only as big as a large dog. My scales were bright white and smooth like mirrors, and my eyes were a rare platinum gold color. I also had a ring of small black scales around my neck, like a black necklace. It looked kind of cool. According to the dragon knowledge, dragons born with unusual features like mine are called variant dragons. Most of them end up weaker than normal, but a few turn out extremely powerful. I hoped I was one of the lucky ones. I decided to leave my old human name behind. From now on, I am Garen, a white dragon. I felt nervous about this strange new world, but also excited. Dragons, undead, giants, elves, demons, gods. This world had everything. Then I heard cracking sounds beside me. Another egg was hatching. A small dragon broke out and immediately spoke her true name in a soft, tiny voice. Hill Roswanessa. Rebecca, my dragon sister Hill was only half my size. She had a slender, graceful body with smooth, soft-looking scales and a long, perfectly shaped tail. She was a very pretty little female dragon. The moment I thought that, I startled myself. Because of the dragon inheritance, my sense of beauty had changed. I now had both human and dragon aesthetics mixed together. Dragon aesthetics are honestly kind of crazy. They can find beauty in practically any living creature, even a slime. That's why there are so many dragon-blooded creatures in this world. Dragons have no breeding barriers with other species, and their appreciation of beauty has done wonders for biodiversity. I still wasn't sure whether I was a human who got a dragon body, or a dragon who absorbed a human soul, but it didn't matter much anymore. The massive flood of dragon knowledge was already making my old human memories fade. I decided to just accept what I am now. After Hill said her true name, she glanced at me, then turned away, swished her tail, and started munching on her own eggshell. I got curious about the flavor and sneaked closer. I swiped a few of her scattered shell pieces with my tail and shoved them in my mouth. They tasted creamy and sweet, like ice cream. Hill herself had a similar scent. I was thinking about stealing more when I heard heavy breathing right behind me. I turned and found my dragon mother's huge face staring at me. She'd caught me red-handed. But she didn't stop me. She just watched with a strange look, like she was observing what I'd do next. Among all dragon species, white dragons care the least about their young. Other evil dragons are cruel and selfish too, but they at least prepare some food and protection for hatchlings, as the evil dragon goddess Tiamat requires. But white dragons often have offspring not out of duty, but just for fun. My mother was only about 90 years old, a young dragon not even fully adult yet. This was her first time being a mother, and she clearly hadn't prepared anything for us. Under her watchful gaze, I awkwardly took the last piece of stolen shell out of my mouth and nudged Hill, giving it to her with a pained expression. Hill thought it was a piece from my own egg. She gave me a look of contempt, swallowed it without a word of thanks, and went back to eating. In typical selfish white dragon fashion, she probably thought sharing food was stupid, no matter how much bigger I was than her. I was still very hungry. Dragon hatchlings grow fast and can eat several times their own body weight. Normally, a mother dragon would have prey ready for her newborns. But our mother had prepared nothing. I was so hungry I tried to eat the cave floor. But when I bit down, my teeth just ached. The ground was covered in ice crystal as hard as steel, frozen solid by the endless cold of the ice plains and our mother's own frost. I couldn't even chew through it, so I tried a different approach. I opened my mouth wide, pointed a claw at it, and looked up at my mother with the most pitiful expression I could manage. My throat was still sore from speaking my true name. Newborn dragons can't really talk properly for the first 2 or 3 weeks, so I could only gesture. It didn't work at all. She just stared at me like I was an idiot. I slowly moved toward my dragon mother, trying to rub against her head and act cute. Anything to get some food. Back when I was human, my pet cat used to do the same thing whenever it was hungry, and it always worked on me. I hoped it would work on her too. It didn't. She just stared at me with cold, sharp eyes, not saying a word. The look alone made me freeze in place. Family love between evil dragons is basically non-existent. I gave up and turned my attention to the other 4 unhatched eggs. They were shaking slightly with small cracks spreading across their surfaces. Dragons usually lay 2 to 6 eggs, and our mother had laid 6, which is on the high end. Only about 5% of dragons lay that many. I noticed those eggs only came up to my chest. The hatchlings inside were probably normal-sized, much smaller than me. I started feeling confident that I could easily overpower all 4 of them. My plan was simple. When they hatch, I'd steal a bit of eggshell from each one. I began casually sliding along the wall toward the eggs, trying to look innocent while my mother was still watching. Before I could do anything, the ground shook. My mother stood up, and her shadow swallowed me whole. The pressure from her massive body was almost suffocating. She stretched her wings, walked to the cave entrance, glanced back once, then launched herself into the blizzard outside and disappeared. With her gone, I crept to the cave entrance and looked out. What I saw took my breath away. Soft snowflakes fell like velvet across an endless white landscape. Howling winds cut through gaps in the glaciers. Far away, I could barely make out winter wolves creeping through the snow and frost tigers hiding with only their eyes showing, waiting for prey. Even in this brutal, frozen world, life was fighting to survive. It was the most stunning thing I had ever seen. In the distance, a massive mountain range stretched from north to south for thousands of kilometers, like a giant wall of snow-covered peaks separating this frozen wasteland from a human kingdom called the Warwick Duchy. Thanks to my dragon inheritance, I knew all of this just by looking. Dragons are born with knowledge of the world. Our nest was built into a cliff face about 500 meters above the ground. I peeked down through the thick snowfall, but could only see layers of deep snow piling up below. I flapped my wings a little and had a feeling I could probably glide down safely, but I decided not to try it yet. I went back inside, and with my mother gone, something at the back of the cave caught my eye. There were piles of fine weapons, armor, scrolls, and all kinds of glowing gemstones. Crystals, agates, jade, diamonds. Most were ordinary, but quite a few pulsed with magical energy. The diamonds were especially plentiful. White dragons love collecting diamonds because the way they reflect light makes the ice crystal walls of the cave sparkle beautifully. My platinum eyes lit up. I had inherited the dragon love of treasure, and even in my past life as a human, my favorite hobby was watching my savings account grow. 2 lifetimes of greed combined into one overwhelming urge. I swallowed hard, and my brain started working overtime, scheming about how to make all those gems mine. I forgot all about stealing eggshells from my siblings. The treasure pile was far more valuable. Magic gemstones contain energy that helps hatchlings grow faster and survive the dangerous early period, and even ordinary gems help strengthen scales and bones. My mother knew this, of course, but evil dragons are too greedy and selfish to share their treasure with their young. Normally, hatchlings wouldn't dare touch their mother's hoard, not out of respect, but because the difference in power is too great, and getting caught means a beating. But I had made up my mind. White dragon hatchlings have the highest death rate of any dragon species, and I had no special cheat system to help me. If I didn't take a risk now, I might not survive to adulthood. I ran to the cave entrance to check. No sign of my mother in the blizzard. She'd be gone for a while. Good. Back inside, my sister Hill had finished her eggshell and was sitting like a dog, watching me curiously. She was the problem. If she saw me take a gem, she'd definitely snitch to our mother and happily watch me get thrown out of the nest. So my first challenge was getting rid of the witness. I grinned at Hill and walked toward her slowly, trying to look friendly, though my sharp baby teeth probably made me look more scary than cute. My body was several times bigger than hers, and the pressure made her back up until she was pressed against the ice wall. She shook her little head and growled a warning at me. White dragon hatchlings aren't very smart. They mostly act on instinct, and their intelligence only improves as they age. Right now, Hill was easy to trick. I waved my clenched claw in front of her to get her attention. She looked down at it, just like I wanted. Then I reared my head back and slammed it forward. A clean headbutt, bone plate against bone plate. Clang. The sound echoed off the ice walls. Hill's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed on the spot, knocked out cold. Dragons are tough, so she'd be fine, just unconscious for about half an hour. I'd controlled my strength carefully. Hill, the dragon life is dangerous. You can't let yourself be fooled so easily, I told her unconscious body with a completely serious expression. I felt no guilt at all. I rubbed my claws together excitedly and ran toward the treasure pile at the back of the cave. Now for the real challenge, taking a gem without my mother noticing. Dragons have terrifying memories. Even a 1,000-year-old dragon can remember every detail from its youth, every hunt, every flight, every pebble. That kind of photographic memory, combined with their obsessive greed, means dragons remember every single piece of their hoard. If even the smallest gem goes missing, they'll notice. So I needed to meet two conditions. First, the gem had to be isolated and at the very bottom, so removing it wouldn't shift anything else and cause a chain reaction. Second, I needed a replacement that looked exactly like the original to fill the gap. I scanned the pile carefully and found my target, a diamond-shaped white crystal sitting at the bottom left edge of the treasure mound, about the size of a baby's fist. It made my mouth water. If the gem had magic in it, I'd need a replacement with matching magical energy. The white crystal I'd picked out contained ice-type magic, which was perfect. White dragons breathe frost, so I could try to make a fake using my own breath. First, some background. Dragons absorb elemental energy from the world just by breathing. Most of it strengthens their body, but some get stored inside and can be released as dragon breath. Dragon breath isn't pure magic, so normal magic resistance doesn't work well against it. Among evil dragons, white dragons rank last in power after red, blue, green, and black dragons. We're the ones who most often end up giving adventurers their Dragon Slayer titles. Our breath weapon is condensed ice magic, frost breath. I started practicing. Breathing out frost came naturally, like how fish just know how to swim. I experimented with controlling the shape by adjusting my breathing rhythm, how wide I opened my mouth, and how much magic I pushed out. To my surprise, I discovered I had an unusual talent for fine magic control. The energy was remarkably obedient in my grip. What I thought would be the hardest part turned out to be manageable. Within minutes, I went from making shapeless ice chunks to proper diamond-shaped crystals. I was a little genius. The shape was right, but the transparency still needed work. I crushed my practice pieces and ate them so nothing went to waste. I kept checking the cave entrance, still no sign of my mother. Meanwhile, Hill's tail started twitching like she was waking up, so I went over and gave her another headbutt. She passed out again. Sorry, sister. After a few more minutes of practice, I finally made a crystal that looked perfect. Same shape, same clarity. I rushed to the treasure pile, carefully pinched the real magic crystal between two claws, holding my breath so I wouldn't bump anything else. Then I gently placed my fake in its spot. The whole thing felt like defusing a bomb. I swallowed the real crystal whole. Immediately, waves of cold energy spread from my stomach through my entire body, like cool streams flowing everywhere, gently massaging me from the inside. For a white dragon who loves the cold, it felt incredible, like getting a full-body massage after a long day and then drinking ice-cold soda. I couldn't help letting out a happy little growl. I needed to digest it fast. Dragon scales block magic detection really well, so even if my mother was right next to me, she shouldn't be able to sense the magic energy inside me, as long as I kept my mouth shut. But I didn't want to act suspicious by only breathing through my nose, so I lay down near the cave entrance and focused on absorbing the crystal's power as quickly as possible. Then I spotted her, a white shape cutting through the blizzard, getting closer fast. My mother was coming back, and I still had about a quarter of the crystal left to digest. She'd arrive in maybe 30 seconds. I pushed myself harder, absorbing wave after wave of magic until my whole body felt numb and weak from the rush. Then something strange happened. The ring of black scales around my neck flashed with a deep, dark light. The world froze. Snowflakes hung motionless in the air. The wind stopped. My mother was suspended mid-flight, like a still photograph. Time itself had paused. I looked up in a daze. Above me, I seemed to see a vast, phantom river stretching across the entire sky, its mysterious waters flowing at a constant, eternal speed. Coiled above it was an enormous dragon-shaped shadow with brilliant platinum eyes just like mine, staring down at me. The giant dragon shadow covering the sky had silver-white scales, enormous wings, and a body so massive it made my mother look like a tiny toy. Lines of black scales ran across its body in a radiating pattern, like tree rings, giving off an ancient, mysterious feeling. The dragon smiled at me meaningfully, then flicked its tail, turned into a flash of white light, shrank down, and flew straight into my body. In that same instant, the remaining magic crystal in my stomach was completely digested, as if a long time had passed in just a moment. All the magic energy merged into me. New knowledge flooded my mind, feeling as natural as if I'd always known it. The river of time. Time-type powers. My future self had lent my present self some time. I finally understood what I really was. I'm not just a white dragon with a weird mutation. I'm a variant time dragon hiding in a white dragon's body. Let me explain. In this world, there are 15 common types of true dragons. Evil dragons, also called chromatic dragons, include red, blue, green, black, and white, with white being the weakest. Good dragons, called metallic dragons, include gold, silver, brass, bronze, and copper. Neutral gem dragons include amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz. Beyond these 15, there are rare dragons, and then there are the 3 legendary dragons: force dragons, prismatic dragons, and time dragons. Time dragons can breathe time, devour time, and travel between past, present, and future. They're considered the rarest and most powerful of all. An adult time dragon can speak with gods as an equal. These legendary dragons are almost never born naturally. The most common way they appear is through variant mutation, which is exactly what happened to me. As a variant time dragon, I can't start out at legendary strength, but my growth potential is extremely high, even higher than a naturally born time dragon. Plus, I still have white dragon frost powers on top of that. No wonder my body was so much bigger than Hill's at birth. Even red dragon hatchlings, the strongest evil dragons, aren't born as large as me. For a moment, my imagination ran wild. Maybe I could become a dragon god, or even rise above the gods themselves. Then I slapped myself across the face. Get a grip. Having potential means nothing if I die young. If anyone found out I was a time dragon, gods and other terrifying beings would hunt me down immediately. They'd skin me for materials, steal my body, or enslave my soul. I needed to stay hidden and grow quietly. So I made a simple plan. Lay low in the frozen north until I reach adulthood at 100 years old. By then, I should have the full power of a time dragon, maybe even stronger because of my variant nature. The frozen wasteland is called the cold desert. Harsh, empty, barely any people, and only a few cold-resistant creatures live here. Not many threats, which makes it a decent place to grow up. The only downside is that food is scarce. One step at a time. First goal, survive to adulthood. My mother landed with a thud, folded her wings, and tossed something down with her tail. It was a massive chunk of ice, about 6 meters long and 3 meters wide, with a huge white bear frozen inside. An Arctic dire bear, a top predator in the frozen north. There wasn't a drop of blood on its fur. She had simply frozen it to death without a real fight. That's the power of a near-adult true dragon. So she had gone out to get us food after all. Not the most responsible mother, but not completely useless either. She lay down on her ice bed and went to sleep. I was relieved she hadn't noticed the missing gem. The energy from the crystal had left me feeling full, but that didn't stop me from eating. I bit through the ice easily. It crumbled in my mouth like a crunchy snack and tore into the bear meat. Warm blood, chewy flesh, tough tendons, all mixed with bits of crushed ice. It was surprisingly delicious. I had expected raw meat to taste awful and bloody, but my dragon taste buds loved it. I ate both massive arms and more meat than my own body weight before finally feeling satisfied. Then Hill woke up from being knocked out. She looked confused, like she was missing a chunk of memory, and her head seemed to hurt. But the moment she spotted the food, she forgot everything and charged over with shining eyes. Suddenly, an overwhelming sleepiness hit me from every cell in my body. I couldn't resist it. I stumbled over to my mother's ice bed and curled up next to her. She opened one eye and lifted a wing to sweep me off, but then she hesitated, put the wing back down, and went back to sleep. Maybe that was as gentle as she could be. I slept for an entire week straight, barely opening my eyes at all. The magic crystal's energy was fueling rapid growth the whole time. When I finally woke up, the blizzard that had lasted over 2 weeks was over. The sky above the frozen north was perfectly clear and blue, and a pale orange sun hung above, casting a faint golden light over the white world. A lot had happened while I slept. Of our mother's 6 eggs, only 4 produced true dragons, me, Hill, and 2 brothers. The other 2 hatched into mindless dragon beasts that couldn't speak their true names. Our mother threw them out of the nest without any emotion. They were probably already dead somewhere in the wasteland. After a week, we hatchlings had grown considerably. Our bones were stronger. Our claws and fangs had real power now. I had grown the most. Thanks to the crystal, I was in a completely different league from my siblings. Just a small movement of my body pushed all 3 of them aside. The bare meat was long gone, and all our stomachs were growling. Our mother was still sleeping and refused to wake up no matter how much we pushed or called. You can never wake a dragon that's pretending to sleep. But this was normal for evil dragons. They deliberately don't give their young enough food, forcing the hatchlings to hunt small creatures on their own. It builds strength and sharpens instincts. Every adult evil dragon grew up this way. So here we were, me, Hill, and our 2 brothers, lined up at the edge of the cave, 500 meters up a steep ice cliff, looking down at the frozen world below, ready to leave the nest and hunt for the first time. After just 1 week of life, a dragon hatchling already has enough power to fight an ordinary lion or tiger. I stood at the edge of the cave, looking down 500 meters at the snow-covered ground below. My siblings were acting on instinct and had no worries, but because I was smarter, I actually felt more hesitant. In my past life, I had a fear of heights, and even though that feeling was mostly gone now, part of me still held back. But flying is a dragon's destiny. I took a few deep breaths and spread my wings. As they moved, magical energy in the air responded like excited little spirits, wrapping around my body and lifting me off the ground. Dragon flight actually works through a passive magical ability. The wings alone can't support a dragon's weight. While I was still testing things out, Hill and my 2 brothers had already leaped from the cave and were soaring freely through the clear blue sky, perfectly graceful on their very first flight. "Garen, why aren't you coming?" Hill called in a bell-like voice, spinning in the air. My 2 brothers, I didn't bother remembering their names, looked at me and taunted. "Garen, are you scared?" I snorted. "Is that how you talk to your elder brother?" I spread my wings wide and launched myself from the cave. Freezing wind and stray snowflakes hit my body. I looked down at the ground far below and felt nothing bad at all. No fear, no discomfort. Just a wonderful sense of freedom and open sky. The world stretched endlessly in every direction. But before I could enjoy it, I had business to handle. "Let me teach you 2 some manners first," I said, narrowing my eyes at my brothers. I noticed my personality had shifted since becoming a dragon. I was less gentle, quicker to answer a challenge. The white dragon's evil nature was influencing me. I didn't fight it. It felt natural, even fun. My brothers exchanged a look and charged me from both sides. Dragons respect strength above all else, and even hatchlings fight to establish rank. Being the biggest doesn't automatically earn respect. You have to prove it. Brother number 1, Charles, reached me first, swinging his claws at my face. I simply lowered my head and rammed him like a heavy tank. He flew backward. I grabbed him by the neck, slammed him into the snow, and beat him senseless. When he tried to growl in defiance, I grabbed his whole face and ground it into the snow. Brother number 2, Tom, had been charging alongside Charles, but froze when he saw how quickly I destroyed his brother. He hovered in the air, too scared to come closer. Then Hill floated over to Tom and whispered in her sweet voice, "Why don't you help Charles? If you team up now, you still have a chance. Otherwise, once Garen finishes with Charles, you're next." Tom hesitated, then gritted his teeth and dove at me. I swatted him out of the air with one wing without even turning around. Then I held both their stupid heads down and rubbed their faces into the frozen ground. Up above, Hill watched and laughed her pretty little laugh. Poor Tom, tricked by the great Hill into getting a beating. After a few minutes, both brothers were thoroughly defeated, bruised, swollen, and rolling onto their backs in surrender. They accepted me as the real boss and would listen to me from now on. I looked up at Hill and said calmly, "Great Hill, I heard everything you said just now." Her smug expression froze. "Now," I said, cracking my claws, "you can fly down and take 2 punches, and I'll let it go. Or you can run, and when I catch you, it'll be much worse." Hill hesitated after hearing my threat, so I told her I'd count to 3. Then, before she could decide, I grinned, launched myself into the air at incredible speed, and headbutt her. She went flying, screaming that I'd cheated. I caught her and gave her the same beating I'd given the others. That's when I noticed something. When I focused hard, time around me seemed to speed up. My movements became faster, smoother, like someone had pressed a fast-forward button. It wasn't something I expected, and even I was surprised by how quick I was. A few minutes later, all 3 siblings were bruised and swollen, lying belly up in the snow, accepting me as the boss. They glared at each other, almost laughing at how bad they all looked, but one looked from me and they went quiet. Proud little hatchlings only understand violence. I was starting to enjoy being a dragon. This lifestyle, doing what you want, strength deciding everything, really suited me. We split up and flew around within a kilometer of the nest to hunt. The area near our mother's cave was relatively safe since she'd killed or driven off all the dangerous creatures. I spotted a foxwolf, a small beast at the bottom of the food chain. I dove down, and that time-speeding feeling kicked in again. The foxwolf barely started burrowing into the snow before my claws grabbed it and snapped its neck. I ate it, but I was still hungry. Growing hatchlings digest food incredibly fast. Instead of hunting more right away, I spent time studying my new ability. After half a day of testing, I figured out several things. The acceleration maxes out at double speed. I can control it on purpose. Using it repeatedly tires my mind, like pulling an all-nighter back when I was human. And I can only speed myself up. I can't slow others down. The ability's name came to me through my inherited memories, time manipulation. A bit of an oversell considering it only does acceleration right now, but maybe it'll grow stronger later. Here in the far north, days and nights don't follow normal cycles. It's 6 months of constant daylight, then 6 months of total darkness. Right now it was the bright season, so the sky never changed no matter how long I hunted. Using my speed advantage, I caught about a dozen animals, foxwolves, white tigers, cold leopards, and filled my belly easily. Nothing could escape me. When I flew back near the nest, I found my siblings looking miserable. Hill asked how many I'd caught. "Call me Brother Garen first," I said. She reluctantly did, so I told them, about 10 or so. Charles's eyes went wide. Tom said I must be lying. I realized they'd barely caught anything and were frustrated and starving. I was confused, honestly. We all had the strength to tear apart a tiger, so why couldn't they catch prey? Right then, a white snake poked its head out of the snow. Hill's eyes lit up and she dove for it. But the instant she moved, the snake shot back underground and vanished. That's when I understood the problem. Without my time acceleration, the prey out here was just too alert and fast for normal hatchlings to catch. Watching Hill fail to catch that snake, I finally understood the problem. I looked more carefully at my siblings and could feel a clear aura coming off them. Dragon's might. The pressure of a top predator. Adult dragons can use this power to freeze creatures in their tracks, but hatchlings can't control it. Instead of helping us hunt, it was warning every animal nearby, scaring them away before we could get close. This was actually dangerous too. An uncontrolled aura acts like a beacon that enemies can follow to find us. Back at the nest, I lay down and focused on learning to control my dragon's might. Thanks to my time dragon nature, I mastered it in about half an hour. The dragon inheritance says that any skill that can be learned is basically a time dragon's natural talent. We pick things up almost instantly. It was the same when I learned fine magic control while making that fake crystal. My siblings took much longer to learn the same thing, but they eventually got it too over the following weeks. After a nap, I woke up to find my mother stretching her wings with a satisfied look from her long sleep, a look that vanished the instant she noticed us hatchlings. She clearly didn't enjoy our company. She flew out and came back with a winter wolf frozen in ice, a powerful magical creature just below dragons on the food chain. When we rushed toward it, she stopped us and divided it into 4 portions with her claws. The biggest piece went to me. I didn't hesitate and started eating immediately. The reason was obvious. I was growing the fastest and was the strongest hatchling. Evil dragons follow one rule in everything, even feeding their young. Strength gets rewarded, weakness gets discarded. My 3 siblings stared at my portion with jealous eyes, but didn't dare try anything. After that, life settled into a routine. My mother brought us one magical creature per week and slept the rest of the time. I hunted constantly on my own, using my time acceleration to catch prey that normal hatchlings couldn't. I ate as much as I could to grow faster. Between hunts, I practiced my abilities and tried to unlock more time dragon powers, but nothing new came, probably too young still. My siblings slowly improved too. After a few weeks of learning to hide their aura and ambush prey from under ice and water, they started catching their own food and stopped going hungry. Every so often, Charles, Tom, or Hill would get restless and challenge me again. I'd beat them up, and they'd behave for a while before inevitably trying again. They never learned. Hunting, exploring abilities, waiting for our mother's weekly feeding, beating up siblings, sleeping. That was my life. Simple, uneventful, but safe and steady. The seasons turned. One full cycle of 6 months of endless daylight followed by 6 months of total darkness passed. When the polar night returned and the sky went dark once more, a white beast 6 meters long with an 8-meter wingspan launched from the cliff nest and soared through the howling winds. That was me, 1 year old. At just a year and a half old, I already had the body of a dragon that should be at least 25 years old, 6 meters long with an 8-meter wingspan. My scales were still perfectly smooth and mirror bright, without a single mark of age. My platinum eyes and the black scale ring around my neck stood out as much as ever. My insane growth speed made sense once I understood it. Through my many deep sleeps, I had gained the ability to see something invisible to other creatures. The river of time, a phantom river that wraps around everything in existence. Every time I breathe, I swallow tiny streams of its water, gaining what I call time power. This fuels my time manipulation and makes me grow over 10 times faster than a normal dragon. And unlike ordinary white dragons whose scales get rougher with age, time leaves no bad marks on me. Only disaster or enemies can kill a time dragon. Aging cannot. I also understood why I learned time acceleration first instead of slowing or reversing. The river of time always flows forward. Going with the current is always easier than fighting against it. But under the dark polar sky, I had a worry. My mother had been looking at me differently, with suspicion and irritation. Normally, a dragon mother raises her young until at least the juvenile stage before kicking them out. But I had grown so abnormally large that she was getting uncomfortable. She'd probably throw me out soon. I had started scouting for a new home. I would fly to the edges of her territory and scan the land below. Going deeper north was out of the question. The further north, the colder and emptier it gets. I eat several times my own body weight every week. I'd starve before anything killed me, and a time dragon dying of hunger would be the joke of the century. South of us lay a massive mountain range stretching for thousands of kilometers, full of magical creatures, underground monsters, and humanoid races. More dangerous than the frozen plains, but at least there would be food. The most dangerous creatures of all, though, are humans. Human adventurers love the title of Dragon Slayer. If an evil dragon is spotted, countless adventurers will swarm in for the glory and the fortune. Dragon teeth, claws, and scales are all valuable magical materials. It's strange to think that my former species is now my greatest threat. I sometimes thought about Earth, that blue planet. The physical rules of this world and Earth's are similar, so Earth is probably somewhere within this same plane of existence. Planes are like collections of countless worlds, each separated by barriers called crystal walls, with an amber fluid called phlogiston filling the gaps between them. Some powerful beings can travel between worlds and planes. Time dragons are one of them. Someday, when I'm strong enough, maybe I could visit Earth again. But that was far in the future. Right now, I was just a hatchling worried about getting kicked out of the nest. Flying under a breathtaking night sky full of stars, my mirror-like scales reflected the darkness around me, turning my body into perfect camouflage. Anyone looking up would probably mistake me for a dark cloud. I reached the edge of my mother's territory and spotted something promising about 15 kilometers away, a small, winding frozen river. Dragons can live on land, in the sea, or in the sky. I could dig a den at the bottom of that river. It would be hidden and safe. I decided to go investigate and check for any dangerous neighbors like frost giants or winter wolves. I glanced back toward the nest one last time, took a deep breath, and crossed the invisible boundary of my mother's domain. The moment I left, the protective pressure of her powerful presence vanished completely. I was on my own. The frozen river was about 15 kilometers away. I could reach it quickly at full speed, but since I was outside my mother's safe territory, I stayed cautious, suppressing my dragon's might and flying quietly to avoid attracting anything dangerous. About 5 kilometers in, trouble found me anyway. A massive eagle with a 10-meter wingspan, even bigger than me, swooped down from above. It was a white feather ice wind eagle, a large magical creature. It launched a barrage of freezing wind and ice needles at me like a storm. I wasn't scared. I'd killed magical creatures before, though mostly tiny ones. This was my chance to test my newest ability. I opened my mouth and breathed at the eagle. No frost came out, nothing visible at all. The eagle seemed confused, probably thinking I was broken. Then an invisible wave hit it. The eagle screamed. Its body lost strength, its eyes went cloudy, its bright feathers turned dull, and its flesh tore apart as if struck by an unseen force. This was my time dragon breath, plunder time threat. An invisible, straight-line attack that ages the target at 2 years per second and deals supernatural damage that's nearly impossible to block with normal magic defenses. The aging speed scales with my own age, so every year I live, it gets 1 year stronger per second. The eagle tried to dodge after being hit, but it was already too late. I activated my time acceleration at double speed, closed the distance in a flash, and smashed its head between both my claws like a pair of cymbals. I felt blood, flesh, and bone crush under my grip. I landed and ate the eagle's body. Magical creature meat is excellent nutrition. The best part about this breath weapon is that enemies can't even see it coming. Someday, when I'm 1,000 years old, one blast will age anything by 1,000 years per second. Nothing would survive that. I continued to the frozen river and scouted along its 20-kilometer length. There were no frost giants, winter wolves, or other dangerous creatures nearby, just small groups of minor beasts like terror lizards, white hounds, and tidal crabs. They had basic magical abilities, but were no threat to me. I started planning. I could build a den under the river, use these small creatures as servants and scouts, and have them bring me food instead of hunting everything myself. It was a good backup plan, though staying in my mother's territory would still be much safer. I flew home. My mother was out, which was a relief. My siblings were all there, and the size gap between us was getting ridiculous. They were only about horse-sized now, while I was 6 meters long. They didn't dare challenge me anymore. "Come here and massage my back," I told them, lying down. They walked over without expression and started pounding my spine with their claws, smooth, practiced movements that showed just how many times I'd made them do this before. I closed my eyes and enjoyed it while recovering my energy. Then my mother returned with prey, a huge magical snake over 10 meters long. I jumped up immediately and went away from my share. She looked at me, then at my 3 small, pitiful-looking siblings standing next to my towering body. Something strange flickered in her yellow eyes. This time, my mother split the prey into only 3 portions, one for each of my siblings, nothing for me. The 3 of them looked at me smugly, as if celebrating that I'd fallen out of favor. I didn't care about their gloating, but I understood the message. She was preparing to kick me out. 3 days later, it happened. When I returned from hunting, my mother stood at the cave entrance, blocking my way. "Garen, you can survive on your own now. It's time to leave my territory." Those were the first words I ever heard her speak. After a year and a half together, the first thing she said to me was a cold, emotionless command to leave. To her, I wasn't her child anymore. I was a threat. I did feel something. I'm not a true evil dragon with no emotions. I'd grown attached to her in my own way. But she didn't care. "Leave my territory. If you return, I will treat you as an enemy." Then she slammed her claw down, cracking the cave floor, and sent a wall of sharp ice crystals shooting toward me. I didn't expect her to actually attack. The ice hit me head-on and sent me flying dozens of meters. My chest scales cracked, and pain washed through me. I said nothing. I turned around, flew over the ice cliff, and headed north toward the frozen river I'd already scouted. My anger slowly cooled as I flew. Being kicked out was fine, it was her territory. But attacking me first? I wouldn't forget that. I reached the small river under the dark polar sky and landed, scattering a group of terror lizards nearby. These creatures looked like giant crocodiles, about 4 meters long, 2 tons heavy, with thick armor scales and sharp teeth. There were 33 of them, led by a 5-meter-long chief that was almost as long as me. They surrounded me, hissing with their tongues flickering. I simply spread my 8-meter wings, blocking out the moonlight, and released my dragon's might. The lizards panicked instantly. Their leader tried to resist and even spat a fireball at me, but I swatted it away with one wing like brushing off a breeze. As a variant time dragon, I have near total magic immunity across all elements. That fireball just felt slightly warm. The leader's courage broke. It lay down and whimpered. I walked over and patted its rough head. It actually seemed to enjoy it. Taming servants is simple for a true dragon. One blast of dragon's might, and most creatures surrender. Some beings even seek out dragons to serve willingly. I did the same with a pack of 40 white hounds nearby. These creatures would be my scouts, my guards, and if necessary, my emergency food supply. As I flew along the river claiming territory, I spotted something unusual, a settlement of strange humanoid beings. I landed to get a closer look. They lived in about 70 crude ice huts. The creatures themselves were beautiful in an odd way, 1 to 2 meters tall, made of translucent ice crystal, with detailed faces that could actually show expressions. They had a delicate, androgynous beauty to them. At first I thought they were water elementals, but water elementals have liquid bodies. These beings were solid ice crystal. Since there was nothing about them in my dragon inheritance knowledge, I decided to name them myself, Arctic Ice Spirits. Finding a settlement of intelligent elemental beings in this frozen wasteland was a pleasant surprise. Unlike the terror lizards and white hounds who couldn't understand complex orders, these creatures had real intelligence and could communicate. The tallest one approached me and spoke in common language. "Great true dragon, it is our honor that you visit us. What are your commands?" I told them this river was now my territory, and they would serve me as my servants. In return, I would protect them. I expected a fight, since elemental beings are usually proud and look down on flesh creatures. But instead, the leader dropped to his knees with excitement, thrilled to have a true dragon as their protector. I was confused, so I asked the leader, Roy Ice River, to show me his abilities. He formed an ice dagger and threw it at me. It shattered against my scales without leaving a scratch. Then he admitted that was his only ability. That explained everything. These ice spirits were practically helpless. Most creatures in the frozen north resist ice damage, so their one ice attack was useless against nearly everything. They couldn't even beat the terror lizards. I asked about their origins. Roy said a respected mage had created their ancestors 1,000 years ago, then left them on the ice plains. I figured they were probably a failed experiment. Some mage tried to create powerful ice elementals, got disappointing results, and abandoned them. That was also probably why my mother never bothered taming them. They were too weak to be worth her attention. I decided to help them. If they were going to serve me, they needed to be stronger. I breathed out frost and shaped a large ice pool several meters wide using my fine magic control, something an ordinary white dragon couldn't do. Then I pricked my claw and squeezed a few drops of my scalding dragon blood into it, diluting it with river water to fill the pool. True dragons have special blood vessels called base blood vessels that carry the power behind all our elemental and supernatural abilities. Dragon blood is aggressively transformative. Any creature that absorbs it becomes a dragon blood being, loyal to the blood's owner from the depths of their heart, worshipping them like a god or emperor. These dragon blood servants are a true dragon's real core followers. Untransformed servants are basically just cannon fodder or emergency food. One by one, the ice spirits bathed in my diluted blood. Each one emerged with a faint dragon's might radiating from their body, officially becoming dragon blood creatures. They gathered before me with joyful faces, bowing in genuine devotion. I now had my first group of intelligent, loyal servants. I wondered whether my time dragon blood might eventually give them some power over time as well. 2 months passed, and my little territory along the frozen river was thriving. The ice spirit village was bustling with terror lizards, white hounds, and tidal crabs all living together peacefully alongside the ice spirits. I had gathered all my servants in one area near my underwater den. The dragon blood transformation had boosted the ice spirits' ice magic abilities, but to my disappointment, none of them gained any time-related powers. They only inherited the white dragon side of my blood, not a trace of time dragon. I was let down at first, but then I accepted it. If time powers were that easy to pass on, time dragons wouldn't be legendary. After another deep sleep, my body had grown to 8 meters long, with a shoulder height of 1 meter 6 and a wingspan of nearly 10 meters. I also gained a new ability that normally only adolescent stage white dragons have. My growth rate would terrify any true dragon who saw it. My main food source was giant hoofed yaks, 4 meters long, 3 tons heavy, hunted by teams of ice spirits leading groups of terror lizards and white hounds. 90% of my servants were busy hunting food for me, and even that barely kept me satisfied. I still had to hunt magical creatures myself sometimes. I built my den at the deepest point of the river, about 50 meters below the surface. I spent a day digging it out and coating it with frost breath to create shiny ice crystal walls, forming an L-shaped tunnel. At the very back was my sleeping area with an ice bed. Dragon eyes have a waterproof membrane and special light-gathering structures, so I can see fine in the dark water, just a bit dim, nothing I can't handle. On my ice bed, I kept 2 treasures I'd dug up from the river mud, a rusted suit of armor and a rusted sword. They were worthless as equipment, but I loved them for the weight of time they carried. For a time dragon, ancient objects with centuries of history are more attractive than gold or gems. Being near them even seemed to slightly increase the speed at which I absorb time energy, which matters since my abilities consume that power. I thought about burying them and digging them up again after many years to let them accumulate even more time, but I only had 2 pieces and couldn't bear to part with them yet. Life had settled into a comfortable routine. The ice spirits praised me whenever I surfaced, and their lives had improved dramatically under my protection. Creatures that used to bully them were now their tamed pets. They didn't need meat. They survived by absorbing ice elemental energy from the air, so all the good meat from their hunts went straight to me. As a true dragon, I didn't bother responding to their worship. I just accepted it. One day, I flew far north to a remote spot where none of my servants could see me. I dug through the snow and frozen soil, carving out a small pit in the ground. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, then turned my noble dragon rear toward the hole I'd just dug. I gazed thoughtfully at the night sky while taking care of business. Dragons eat a lot, so there's a lot of waste to deal with after the nutrients are absorbed. A proper evil dragon would just let things drop from the sky mid-flight, and occasionally hit some lucky soul below. But even as a dragon, I still have a shred of dignity. I couldn't bring myself to do that. Doing it in the river was out too. I didn't want surprises showing up in my den someday, so the frozen wilderness would have to do. After finishing, I swept snow over the evidence with my tail and was about to head home when I sensed something approaching from behind. I spun around. A 9-foot-tall muscular humanoid was sneaking toward me. Dark, rough skin, white pupils with black eyes, reeking of filth, wearing crude animal hide, and carrying a huge wooden-spiked club stained with dried blood. An ogre. The moment our eyes met, it froze mid-step. Then it forced out the ugliest smile I'd ever seen and mumbled something in a language I didn't understand. Giant tongue, which isn't part of dragon inheritance knowledge. This thing had been trying to sneak up on me. While I was using the bathroom, it wanted to ambush a true dragon while I was taking a dump. The last time I was this angry, I couldn't even remember. I didn't waste a second. I launched forward with a beat of my wings and opened my mouth wide. People think dragon breath is just a regular attack, like a tail swipe or wing slap. That's completely wrong. Dragon breath is our ultimate weapon, incredibly powerful, nearly impossible to defend against, and even adult dragons can't sustain it for long. It's not a casual move. It's the finishing blow. I hit the ogre with everything. My cone-shaped frost breath covered its entire body instantly, freezing it solid inside a thick shell of ice crystal. It didn't even have time to swing that stupid club. I flew back to my territory carrying the frozen ogre in one claw and dropped it on an empty patch of ground. The ice spirits glanced over, saw it was just me, and went back to their business. I hadn't killed the ogre. I'd held back on purpose. Ogres are social creatures that live in groups, so if one showed up here, there had to be a tribe nearby. I needed to find out where they were. I didn't want to wake up one day from a deep sleep and find myself surrounded by ogres, seasoned with garlic, and sitting in a cooking pot. I melted the ice and let the ogre thaw out. When it woke up and saw me, it threw away its club and started bowing frantically, babbling in a language I didn't understand. Giant tongue. I tried speaking common language, but the ogre just stared blankly. It only knew giant. I was about to give up and feed it to my terror lizards, since it stank too badly for me to eat myself. But then something interesting happened. As the ogre kept begging and repeating certain words, I started understanding some of them. True dragon, spare me. It hit me. This was the time dragon talent at work. The dragon inheritance says any knowledge, skill, or language is a time dragon's natural ability. I had an incredible gift for learning languages. I decided to keep the ogre alive and learn giant from it. I pointed at the ground. It said, Barakan, earth. I looked at the sky. It said, Rakas, sky. And so it continued. I was like a child with a new toy. Every word I learned connected to new phrases, which led to grammar patterns. The more basics I grasped, the faster I learned. The whole process gave me a rush of genuine pleasure, an excitement from gaining new knowledge that surprised me with how good it felt. In just 3 days, I could hold simple conversations in Giant. I was amazed at my own talent, learning an entire language just from one ogre talking to me. I now knew 5 languages: Dragon, Common, Giant, Chinese, and English. Chinese was from my past life, and English I'd had a basic foundation in before, but my time dragon talent had filled in the gaps and brought it to full fluency. Once I could communicate, I got to work. I looked at the exhausted, starving ogre and asked in Giant, Yuga, how many people are in your Bone Crusher tribe? I signaled an ice spirit to bring food, a bowl of squirming, fat ice worms. These plump, white grubs live under the snow and eat nothing but ice. Under my guidance, the ice spirits had started farming them as feed for the terror lizards and white hounds. They actually taste pretty good if you can get past the look, cool, fresh, with a clean snowy flavor. I sometimes snack on them myself. Yuga wolfed down the ice worms after 3 days of starving and answered my questions without hesitation. The trader sold out his entire tribe without a second thought. The Bone Crusher tribe has 44 members, 1 two-headed ogre chief, 22 adult males, 10 adult females, and 11 young ones, a two-headed ogre. That worried me. Most ogres are simple brutes who swing big clubs, but occasionally a smarter subspecies is born, an ogre mage. Two-headed ogres are always ogre mages, with both strong bodies and spellcasting ability. Having 2 heads lets them think on 2 tracks at once, making them much more dangerous than regular ogre mages. In this world, magic means power. A wealthy mage can defeat over a dozen warriors of the same level. High-level mages who can cast 9th circle spells and above are basically walking nuclear weapons, respected everywhere, able to influence kingdom decisions with a single word. How far is your tribe from here? I asked. Not far. About 50 kilometers. That's nothing for creatures like us. Then Yuga said something that made my expression change. Our tribe members sometimes hunt near this river. There's water here, so prey is plentiful. That meant ogres could stumble onto my territory at any time. If they found my den while I was in deep sleep, it could be deadly, especially with that 2-headed chief around. Tell me everything you know about your chief's abilities, I said. Yuga's eyes lit up. He knew exactly what I was planning and was thrilled about it. He eagerly described the chief, a 2-headed ogre named Syra Bone Crusher, about the same height as Yuga. The only spell Syra had ever used was a branching lightning bolt, powerful for an ogre, but not exactly impressive for a spellcaster. After hearing everything, I asked Yuga why he was so happy to betray his chief. He scratched his head with a sheepish grin. Because Yuga wants to be chief. Syra is Yuga's biggest obstacle. Then he knelt solemnly. Great true dragon, if you kill Syra and help Yuga become chief, I swear by the sun god. The Bone Crusher tribe will serve you and follow your commands. The sun god? That was odd. Ogres don't worship sun gods. They usually follow gods of strength or courage. And there's no sun god recorded in the dragon inheritance for this continent. But a divine oath is serious business regardless. In a world where gods actually exist, breaking a sworn oath brings real curses. It's not something said lightly. I was tempted. The tribe's total fighting strength far exceeded all my current servants combined. If I could control them, it would solve many problems, better defense, more hunters to feed my growing appetite, and I wouldn't have to handle every threat personally. My ice spirits were getting stronger, but still weak. The terror lizards and white hounds weren't much either. I also couldn't afford to leave a hostile ogre tribe 50 kilometers away. If I didn't deal with them before my next deep sleep, I'd be vulnerable. I made my decision. Before my next deep sleep, I would either destroy or take over this tribe. I looked Yuga over, 3 meters tall, packed with hard muscle. He told me he was already the strongest fighter in the tribe besides the chief, despite having just reached adulthood. That's what gave him the ambition to replace the chief in the first place. Great dragon, Are you thinking about how to handle the ordinary ogre warriors? Yuga read my expression perfectly. This ogre was surprisingly sharp, far smarter than his kind usually is. He was desperate to become chief and wasn't going to waste this chance. He thumped his chest and said confidently, Yuga knows Syra's habits. I can lure him out of the tribe for you. Just kill Syra, and every ogre in the Bone Crusher tribe will become your loyal servant. What a traitor. He was ready to sell his entire tribe to a dragon just to become chief. I almost felt sorry for the two-headed ogre. After getting more details about the tribe's layout and the chief's location, I told Yuga to stay in my territory and wait, then flew off toward the Bone Crusher tribe. I deliberately left no magical restraints on him. It was a test. If he was truly committed to his plan, he'd still be there when I returned. If not, I'd have to destroy the tribe instead of taming it. I glided at high altitude to save energy, riding air currents through the dark polar sky. Dragons have incredible endurance thanks to 4 massive heart chambers that pump power nonstop. Adult dragons can fly for days at full speed, or glide for an entire year. I'm still a hatchling, so I couldn't match that, but steady gliding worked fine since I wasn't in a rush. I spotted the tribe, a bowl-shaped valley dotted with crude stone buildings. Muscular ogres sat around campfires with big iron pots bubbling with thick yellow stew. Occasionally, I could see animal limbs floating in the broth. Despite their name, ogres don't only eat people, they eat whatever they can catch. In the center of the settlement stood a larger stone hut with animal hides on the roof. Inside, I could see the two-headed ogre, one big head, one small, kneeling before a round black wooden sculpture, praying devoutly. Suddenly, it sensed something. Both heads snapped their eyes open, and the creature grabbed a staff and a spiked club, storming outside to scan the sky suspiciously. Its 4 eyes locked onto the area where I was hovering. My heart tightened. At this distance, it could still vaguely sense my presence. Fortunately, I had a new ability from my last deep sleep, Fog Cloud, a spell-like ability that wrapped me in dark mist that blended perfectly with the night sky. After staring for several minutes, the two-headed ogre shook both its heads and muttered, "Nothing. Just my imagination." It went back inside to continue praying. From my hidden position, I watched something invisible to normal eyes. Thin threads of black mist reaching out from the sculpture like tentacles, touching the ogre's body. Each touch made it shudder with deeper devotion. That was unsettling. Something was definitely wrong with that sculpture and whatever the two-headed ogre was worshipping. I circled above the Bone Crusher tribe hidden in my fog cloud, a spell-like ability that white dragons normally learn in their adolescent years, though I'd mastered it while still a hatchling. It creates mist that hides me from sight and blocks magical detection. Perfect for scouting. After confirming Yuga's count of adult ogres was accurate, I didn't head straight home. Instead, I searched the area within a 20-kilometer radius of the tribe for a good ambush spot. Dragons might be powerful, but we prefer surprise attacks, swooping from the sky or bursting from the ground. We're more like cats than reptiles in that way. About 90 minutes later, I found the perfect place, a frozen lake several kilometers across, covered in smooth ice. When I landed on it, I discovered something wonderful. My claws generated a special force on contact with ice, giving me perfect grip and support. I could run across the slippery surface faster than on normal ground. This was ice walking, a white dragon's extraordinary ability. Not magic, just our unique body structure. No anti-magic field could take it away. A frozen lake where I could move freely while an ogre would slip and stumble. Perfect for an ambush from beneath the ice. I flew back to my territory. The whole trip had taken several hours, plenty of time for Yuga to run if he wanted to. But when I looked down from above, there he was. He was sparring with Roy Ice River. Yuga charged like a tank, shaking the ground with each step, while Roy fired volleys of ice spikes from his hands. Much stronger than the pathetic ice dagger he'd shown me 2 months ago. But the spikes just left white scratches on Yuga's tough skin without breaking through. Ogre hide is incredibly durable. Yuga grabbed Roy in one hand, laughing triumphantly. Roy, unable to understand giant, just sighed in common and asked to be put down. I landed silently behind Yuga. My shadow swallowed his. Roy's face lit up with relief. Yuga froze, slowly turned around, and forced a smile. Great dragon, you're back. He was shocked that something my size could land without making a sound. I told Roy he was improving and had real potential. Someday he'd be as strong as an ogre. A simple encouragement, but the ice spirit's face glowed with gratitude. Praise from a true dragon is rare. Then I grabbed Yuga's shoulder with one claw, spread my wings, and launched into the sky with him dangling below me. His several-ton body felt like a toy in my grip. He trembled the entire way up. Carrying a several-ton ogre while flying is tiring, even for me. Yuga wasn't bothered by the cold. Ogres living in the frozen north have evolved strong resistance. But he shook non-stop from fear of heights. He couldn't even look down. Fair enough. Any creature that can't fly would be terrified dangling from a dragon's claw 1,000 meters up. Knowing one slip means becoming unrecognizable meat paste. Actually, grabbing tough enemies and dropping them from the sky is a classic dragon tactic. If I didn't want to tame the tribe, I could just keep flying over and bombing them with boulders. I brought Yuga to the frozen lake. His legs were like jelly when I set him down. After he recovered, I pointed at the ice beneath us. Lure the two-headed ogre here. That's your only job. I also told him to try to get the chief to come without weapons. The sooner we did this, the better. Delays only create problems. Yuga was practically vibrating with excitement. Yes, great dragon. Yuga will not disappoint you. He turned and disappeared into the darkness. Once he was gone, I stomped the ice hard. Cracks spread like a spider web, and the surface broke apart, exposing the dark water beneath. I took a deep breath and slipped in. The water was cold enough to kill a human in seconds, but to me it felt like a refreshing bath. I sealed the ice above me with my frost breath, erasing all traces. White dragon scales match ice and snow perfectly. Moving under the ice, I created no light ripples, no water disturbance, completely invisible. On the frozen north, white dragons are the ultimate ambush predators. If I targeted something from under the ice, I could sense its exact position, weight, and numbers just through tiny vibrations in the surface above. A year of hunting under my mother's territory had taught me all of this. I settled into position and waited patiently. Meanwhile, Yuga killed a large white tiger on his way back to use as his coming-of-age trophy. It wasn't impressive compared to the giant snake their chief had once killed, but he didn't care anymore. He had bigger plans. He arrived at the Bone Crusher tribe with the tiger on his shoulders. The other ogres crowded around, praising him and declaring him a proper adult. They dragged the tiger away, skinned it, and tossed it into the big iron cooking pot. That was tradition. The trophy gets shared with all adults, symbolizing that you're one of them now. Without wasting a moment, Yuga marched straight to the chief's stone hut and barged in without knocking. "Chief, I found a human mage." The two-headed ogre's annoyed expression instantly changed to excitement. Its big head leaned forward, for eyes locked on Yuga. "Are you sure?" Yuga nodded frantically. "He was fighting a gale leopard east of here. He won but got injured. He's stronger than me, but definitely no match for you, Chief." The big head's eyes widened. "Then what are you standing around for, you idiot? Lead the way." Even during the polar night, the frozen north wasn't truly dark. Snow and ice reflected the starlight and moonlight, making everything glow like a white dream world. Yuga led the two-headed ogre straight toward the frozen lake. The chief had cast a speed spell on both of them, and they charged across the snow like armored vehicles. Along the way, several creatures tried to ambush them, but the chief crushed each one effortlessly, smashing them with his black-spiked club or burning them to ash with magic. Watching this, Yuga started wondering if I could actually beat this monster. But Yuga had no other path. The chief was in his prime, and by the time he grew old, Yuga would be old too. Remembering my instructions, Yuga offered to carry the chief's heavy club so he'd have more energy for the fight with the human mage. The chief handed it over without suspicion, but kept his staff gripped tightly and refused to give that up. They stepped onto the frozen lake. The chief frowned at the wide-open emptiness, and Yuga looked around nervously. He couldn't see me anywhere either. Good. I was beneath them, hidden in the dark water, wrapped in my fog cloud, completely still. I had stopped breathing. I was a lifeless dragon-shaped statue waiting in silence. The instant they'd stepped onto the ice, I'd felt the vibrations through the frozen surface. I tracked their every step. 200 meters. 100. 20. 10. When they were right above me, I exploded upward. My dragons might burst through the ice first, hammering their minds. The chief's body locked up for just a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. Cracks spiderwebbed across the entire surface. My platinum eyes blazed through the shattering ice, and I unleashed my frost breath from below. A storm of freezing wind, broken ice chunks, and razor-sharp ice spikes that engulfed the two-headed ogre completely. One attack. Ambush, Dragon's Might, Frost Breath, all combined. The chief was badly wounded and frozen solid inside a block of ice, both faces locked in expressions of pure terror, his body riddled with puncture wounds from ice spikes. I erupted from the water and landed on intact ice nearby. Water cascaded off my scales. Yuga stared at me with his jaw hanging open. I could tell the chief was still alive inside the ice, so I opened my mouth again and fired my plunder time thread to finish the job. But then something wrong happened. Black vein-like lines bulged across the chief's skin, writhing beneath the surface. The moment my time breath was about to connect, the ice exploded outward and a wave of dark fog surged toward me, trying to swallow me whole. The black fog radiating from the two-headed ogre felt deeply wrong. Evil, chaotic, insane. I activated my time manipulation at maximum triple speed, grabbed Yuga, and dodged. My plunder time thread hadn't connected either. At less than 2 years old, that ability just isn't powerful enough yet. This wasn't normal magic. My elemental senses told me that every element in the air was fleeing from the black fog like it was poison. Any energy that didn't escape fast enough got absorbed and became part of it. This felt like power from the abyss or the nine hells, the outer planes ruled by demons and devils. Even dragons warn their young not to mess with those forces. I glanced at Yuga. He looked completely stunned. He clearly knew nothing about his chief's dark powers. Then he snapped out of it, grabbed the chief's spiked club, and sprinted away as fast as he could. The fog pulsed like a heartbeat and began shrinking. I tried hitting it with frost breath and then plunder time thread, but the fog moved like a living thing, dodging both attacks. I spread my wings, ready to fly away if things got worse. But the two-headed ogre had anticipated that. A white beam of light shot up from the fog and spread across the sky, covering a huge area. Suddenly my body felt heavy. I beat my wings but couldn't lift off. This was Skylock, a spell that suppresses flying ability. One of the most popular dragon-slaying spells. I didn't know how to dispel magic, so I was grounded. Still, my real strength isn't in flying. Then I heard a prayer in common language from inside the fog. Great Sun God, creator of all things, your humble follower Cyrobone Crusher offers you a dragon's heart as tribute. Grant your servant the power to slay this dragon and spread your immortal glory. The fog collapsed inward and vanished, all of it absorbed into the ogre's body. I was shocked. This creature was using divine magic, power granted by a god through devoted prayer. But nothing about this felt like a sun god's blessing. Sun gods mean warmth, light, and life. This power was pure evil and chaos. Whatever this ogre worshipped, it was no real sun god. I had no time to think further. The two-headed ogre stood up, black vein-like patterns squirming across its skin. All the wounds from my frost breath had completely healed. For thick, fleshy black tentacles had grown from its back, covered in dozens of eyeballs rolling in every direction. It was horrifying. Both heads fixed all 4 eyes on me with crazed, bloodthirsty hunger. I took a deep breath and blasted my frost breath at triple speed, making it almost impossible to dodge. But the chief was ready this time. Its big head chanted a spell while the small head opened wide. A red pentagram covered in runes appeared before its mouth, sucking in fire elemental energy until its mouth glowed like molten lava. Dragon breath mimicry, red dragon fire breath. A massive stream of fire erupted from the small head, amplified by the magic circle, and slammed directly into my ice blue frost breath. Our breath attacks collided, my ice blue frost against its copied red dragon fire. Shockwaves rippled outward, cracking the ice beneath us. The fire breath looked impressive, but it was clearly weaker than a real dragon's. My frost slowly pushed it back, inching closer to the two-headed ogre. Then the big head finished casting another spell. The ogre flashed with magical light and teleported above me. Its black tentacles stretched long like spider legs, clawing at my head. In close combat, breath attacks are useless, so I stopped wasting energy on them. But close combat at triple speed? That's where I shine. I reared up on my hind legs and tail, and slashed at the ogre with my claws so fast, it was like we were moving in completely different time streams. I deliberately avoided the black tentacles and struck its midsection, sending it flying. My claws left 4 massive gashes that exposed steaming organs inside. But the black vein patterns on its body squirmed like living threads and stitched the wounds shut in seconds. Insane regeneration, another gift from its so-called divine power. I leaped after it immediately. The ogre blinked away with teleportation, and I crashed through the ice into the water below. When I jumped back out, it was already fully healed. I sized up the situation. The two heads worked perfectly together. One controlled the body for fighting and absorbed pain, while the other focused entirely on casting spells. It was basically a warrior and mage fused into one. But the real problem was that evil regeneration from its god. The ogre was also shocked by me. It had expected an easy fight against a young white dragon. My impossible speed had shattered that confidence. It knew it couldn't outlast a dragon in a battle of endurance and magic reserves. Both heads exchanged a look of grim determination. They were going to use their strongest attack. The big head closed its eyes and began chanting with intense focus. Lightning elemental energy started gathering in the air. A tingling sensation spread everywhere. Far behind me, Yuga touched his head and found his sparse hair standing straight up. I wasn't going to let them finish. I dropped to all fours and charged like a giant cat, using my wings for extra speed, a white lightning bolt streaking across the ice. I slammed my dragon's might down on the ogre, making its body freeze and its chanting stutter for just an instant. I grabbed for the big head with fully extended claws. It couldn't teleport while concentrating on its spell, but the small head controlled the body to block. Thick arms rose up to guard. I hammered it with a barrage of hits at triple speed, driving it backward, tearing flesh from its arms until white bone showed through. It was getting torn apart under my assault, but it still had those 4 black tentacles, covered in dozens of eyeballs, all locked onto me, watching my every move. They made my skin crawl. I didn't dare let them touch me. Whatever that dark power was, I wanted no part of it. The black tentacles kept aiming for my head, trying to burrow inside. I had to devote nearly half my attention just to dodging them, which made fighting much harder. The constant triple-speed combat was draining me fast. My time power reserves had dropped below 50%, and my mind was growing tired. Without time acceleration, I was just a young white dragon, and that wasn't enough to beat this thing. I set myself a limit. If I couldn't gain a decisive advantage by the time my reserves hit 20%, I'd retreat. I could tear this ogre apart if I went all-out offense and ignored defense, but those tentacles were too dangerous to risk touching. Then my chance came. The ogre's body suddenly seized up in pain, some kind of strain from all that dark power. Its guard dropped for just a split second. I grinned and swept its legs with my tail, slamming it to the ground. Before it could get up, I pinned it down with all 4 limbs, claws locking its arms. I opened my mouth directly over the big head and unleashed my frost breath at full power, point blank. The ogre thrashed so violently it cracked the ice beneath us, and we both plunged into the freezing lake. The icy water energized me, but nearly paralyzed the ogre. It had thrown itself into an even worse situation. Underwater, I moved even faster. I held it down and blasted it continuously with everything I had. The black tentacles, the body, both heads, everything froze into thick ice crystal. The dark vein patterns squirmed desperately. The tentacles shook trying to break free like last time, but I didn't let up for a single second. I poured out every last drop of frost until my throat felt raw and frozen, like ice was stuck in it. The ogre's life force collapsed like a cliff and finally disappeared completely. It was dead. I exhaled with deep relief. My throat ached badly from the sustained output, a side effect of pushing my breath weapon too hard. I dragged the frozen corpse up through the ice and climbed out, only to find a massive black thundercloud had formed 500 meters above, dozens of meters across, crackling with silver lightning. The ogre had finished its final spell right before dying. Fortunately, it had cast it in such a rush that the cloud was positioned several hundred meters away from me. Without anyone controlling it, it was just a spectacle, not a threat. I watched with fascination as lightning bolts rained down one after another, turning the polar night into blazing daylight. Thunder shook the air. The barrage lasted 8 full minutes before the cloud finally faded. Looking at that display of magical power stirred something in me. I only knew innate abilities, spell-like and supernatural powers I was born with. Real magic, learned spells, were still a complete mystery to me. And like my love for ancient time-worn objects, I felt a deep natural hunger to explore that unknown territory. I also couldn't help thinking, if that ogre had been smarter about hiding its strength, or if I'd been a little weaker, this fight could have gone very differently. Yuga's intelligence about the chief only knowing a branching lightning bolt had been completely wrong. not because Yuga lied, but because the two-headed ogre had hidden its true power even from its own tribe, probably to guard against exactly the kind of betrayal Yuga had pulled. This world is more dangerous than I keep expecting. I need to grow stronger, faster. I took a deep breath of cold air and looked at the dead two-headed ogre frozen in ice. Its face was locked in an expression of fear and defiance. All the dark vein patterns and black tentacles had vanished as if they'd never existed. But the memory of that evil energy still lingered in my mind. How had this ogre connected with its so-called sun god? I had no answer. Yuga came running over, ecstatic, bowing flat on the ground. You really killed Syra? The Bone Crusher tribe will be your strongest weapon. I noticed something important. The black spiked club Yuga was carrying had a faint, blood-red magical glow. It wasn't an ordinary weapon. If the two-headed ogre had fought me with both the club and the staff, the battle might have gone differently. Yuga taking the club away before the fight had been more helpful than I'd realized. Come, we're going to the Bone Crusher tribe, I commanded. I grabbed Yuga in one claw and the frozen ogre corpse in the other, then flew up to 1,000 meters. Below, the bowl-shaped valley came into view with the ogres sitting around their cooking pots, picking their noses and scratching their feet, arguing about whether Yuga or their chief was stronger. They had no idea their chief was already dead. Then one sharp-eyed ogre spotted me descending from the sky. Dragon! There's a dragon! They all looked up. My gleaming white scales, platinum eyes, and dragons might hit them like a wall. But ogres are fierce by nature. Once they realized I wasn't fully grown, they grabbed their weapons, mostly big clubs, a couple of axes, and stood ready to fight. Bold of them. One ogre hurled a boulder at me. I met it with frost breath, froze it in midair, and sent it flying back. The stream of frost swept over the ogre who threw it, turning it into an ice sculpture. Dead instantly. Insects, attack a true dragon and you pay with your lives, I roared in giant. Then I dropped Yuga and the frozen chief's corpse on the ground. Yuga scrambled to his feet and shouted at his tribe mates. Do you want to die? Chief Syra is dead. The Bone Crusher tribe now belongs to the great true dragon. The ogres saw their fellow warrior frozen solid in a single breath. They looked at each other nervously, weapons lowering. I stood there in silence, letting my dragon's might do the talking. A true dragon doesn't need to explain or argue. Presence alone is enough. Yuga slammed the chief's black spiked club into the ground and declared, anyone who refuses to serve the dragon dies. Everyone who accepts. Kneel. He made an excellent mouthpiece. I had no interest in dealing with simple-minded ogres directly. After a moment of hesitation, they knelt, every single one, male and female, young and old. Ogres respect strength above all else, and I just demonstrated mine clearly enough. From today, the Bone Crusher tribe serves me, I said in a deep voice reinforced with dragon's might. You are my claws. You will crush my obstacles and tear apart my enemies. Every head bowed deeper. The ogre I'd killed lay frozen nearby. Not one of them looked at it again. After subduing the Bone Crusher tribe, I told Yuga to follow me. He was beaming. Now the leader of over 40 ogres, all thanks to me. He called me Master with genuine respect. I walked through the tribe toward the two-headed ogre's stone house. It was 6 meters tall, 100 square meters, with a 4-meter wooden door. By folding my wings, I could fit inside. The floor was covered in animal hides. The air smelled faintly of beasts, and there was a stone bed against the wall with crude cultural markings carved into the walls. But my eyes locked onto one thing, a black wooden sculpture. At first glance, it looked like a black sun with flames radiating outward. But looking closer, those flames were actually dense tentacles covered in eyeballs. The sphere itself was carved with countless eyes too, disturbingly lifelike. Evil energy radiated from it. Yuga, what is this? That's our sun god, master. I was stunned. This thing looked nothing like a sun god. It was clearly some kind of evil deity's idol. How could anyone mistake this for a sun god? Then something frightening happened. A powerful curiosity pulled at me. Without realizing it, my eyes went glassy and I started walking toward the sculpture, step by step. Whispers filled my mind in a language I'd never heard, yet somehow understood perfectly. It was born in black fog, and it created the black fog. It brings darkness. It brings light. It writes life. It rewrites death. It is the creator of all things. It is the supreme sun, sun that brings darkness. That snapped me awake. I was horrified to find myself less than 2 meters from the sculpture, reaching out a claw to touch it. I activated triple speed and shot back to the doorway like a startled cat. This thing had nearly taken control of my mind. A dragon's mental defenses are incredibly strong. Our brains contain base blood vessel structures that can shrug off most mental magic. Time dragons are even more resilient. Yet this simple-looking idol had almost gotten me. It tried again. Even from the doorway, when I looked at those carved eyes, the whispers returned and my gaze started going hazy. But I was prepared this time and broke free immediately. I figured out the trick: the eyes. As long as I didn't look directly at them, the effect vanished. I closed my eyes, turned my head, and blasted the sculpture with frost breath until it was sealed inside a thick, opaque block of ice. When I opened my eyes again, the influence was gone. I asked Yuga to tell me everything about the sculpture. He said the two-headed ogre had brought it back one day from a trip outside the tribe and told everyone to worship the sun god. But besides the chief, who was fanatically devoted, the other ogres only paid lip service to the religion. The sculpture's true origin remained a mystery, and it was clearly connected to whatever dark god had given the two-headed ogre those terrifying powers. I fell silent, thinking carefully about what to do. Anything connected to a god demands extreme caution. Gods are the most powerful immortal beings across all planes. Even Tiamat, the five-headed dragon queen whose name echoes through countless worlds, only ranks as a lesser deity in the divine hierarchy. That's how terrifyingly powerful gods are. Even when I reach adulthood at 100, I'll still need to tread carefully around divine matters. Right now, as a hatchling, this was way above my level. The sculpture was connected to an evil god, a deity that treats life as worthless, harvests souls, and demands living sacrifices. Evil god churches exist in this world but operate in the shadows, and when discovered, they get hunted down by united forces. I searched through my entire dragon inheritance, but found nothing matching this particular idol. An unknown evil god is even more worrying than a known one. Still, I wasn't too frightened. Gods mostly exist in the outer planes and can't easily enter this world directly. They mainly work through their followers. For now, I left the frozen sculpture alone. Something else in the two-headed ogre's stone house caught my attention. A gray wooden table covered with strange bottles, jars, green liquids, and unknown creature parts. In one corner sat 5 yellowed books. I picked up the first one, Complete Collection of Apprentice Cantrips. My eyes lit up. The other titles were Principles of Spellcasting, The Libertine Paladin, Summary of Conjuration and Transmutation Spells, and Magical Creature Encyclopedia. One of these was clearly not like the others. I sent Yugo away and opened The Libertine Paladin first. It was basically a trashy adventure novel about a paladin traveling across the continent, having romances with princesses, noble ladies, elven women, and even taming a female red dragon as a mount. 56 pages with colorful illustrations. Pure guilty pleasure. But surprisingly, it contained useful details about customs, cultures, and secrets of different regions across the continent. Things not covered in my dragon inheritance. Despite the exaggeration, most of it seemed believable. Then I picked up Principles of Spellcasting, and everything changed. The book explained that a spell is a process of reshaping the magical energy that fills the multiverse, weaving invisible raw magic into specific patterns that vibrate and release desired effects. Spells can be tools, weapons, or barriers. They can heal or harm, create or remove conditions, drain or grant life force. Spell levels indicate power. Level 0 cantrips need only a thought, but high-level spells demand a caster's full concentration. Some require rare materials or even the caster's own life force. Before casting, a spell must be inscribed into the caster's consciousness or stored in a magical item. The book listed common runes, incantations, and basic magic circle structures. I read every single word carefully, slowly, treating each character with respect. When I finished, I felt something profound stir inside me. A deep, trembling joy unlike anything before. Not just happiness, but a spiritual fulfillment that made my claws shake. And in that moment, I finally understood what I truly wanted. Since arriving in this world, I'd been drifting, survive, grow stronger, don't die. That was just going through the motions, not a real purpose. But now I recognized the feeling that had been building since I first learned Giant from Yuga, that electric thrill of mastering new knowledge. I wanted to know everything. Every language, every spell, every secret across every plane in existence. I have endless time, perfect memory, and an immortal dragon's body. Someday, all knowledge in all worlds will be mine. It sounds impossible. Even gods aren't all-knowing. The so-called god above gods isn't all-powerful. But that's exactly what makes it a dream worth chasing. If it were easy, it wouldn't be worth calling an ideal. The fog in my heart cleared completely. For the first time, I could see my path stretching ahead, clear as a blue sky. I spent 3 hours absorbing every book. Only 2 contained actual spell models, complete collection of apprentice cantrips, and summary of conjuration and transmutation spells. Then I closed my eyes and focused. In my mind, I carefully drew a hand-shaped spell model, inscribing basic runes and incantations onto it. My mental strength made this surprisingly easy. Within minutes, a vivid model appeared in my consciousness. Every rune and line perfectly clear. This was Mage Hand, a level 0 cantrip. The most commonly used trick in magic. 99% of mages learn it first. Cantrips are simple enough to cast with just a thought. I opened my eyes, pointed a claw at a glass container on the table, and channeled magic. A translucent hand formed in the air, wobbled over, and grabbed the container, the green liquid inside bubbling from the shaking. It worked on my very first try. I got excited and started pointing everywhere. Translucent hands picked up different objects and flew around me in circles. Any human mage watching would have been shocked. Casting the same spell multiple times with perfect control on the first attempt is unheard of. But something felt off. The spell created a human hand. I'm a dragon. A dragon using human hands looked ridiculous. I closed my eyes again and started redesigning the model, reshaping it into a dragon claw, sharp talons, layered scales, a fierce appearance. The runes decorated the new contours beautifully. My first attempt at casting the modified version failed. The model was more complex now, with more magic pathways and rune nodes needed. But I wasn't discouraged. I kept refining it, adding runes, adjusting connections. 20 minutes later, I had a perfected dragon claw model with every scale clearly defined. The added complexity meant it was no longer a simple cantrip I could cast silently. It now required spoken incantation. I chanted the rune words. The air rippled, and a basketball-sized translucent dragon claw materialized, scales realistic, radiating raw power. I slammed it into the ground. A thunderous boom shook the earth, sending dirt and rocks flying. When the dust cleared, a deep dragon claw print was carved 3 inches into ground as hard as iron, with hairline cracks spreading outward like a spiderweb. The impact was comparable to hitting the ground with my own actual claw. I couldn't help praising myself. Impressive. Well done, Garen. Based on the spellcasting theory book's guidelines about power levels and rune complexity, I estimated my modified spell was equivalent to a 3rd-level spell, upgraded from a 0-level cantrip through my own design. By this world's naming conventions, it should technically be called Garen's Dragon Claw spell, but that sounded awkward. I named it simply Dragon Hand. True dragons fight mainly with their powerful bodies, spell-like abilities, and supernatural powers when young. But as dragons grow ancient, they rely less on physical combat and more on deep magical knowledge. Eventually, magic surpasses even a dragon's physical destructive power. Time dragons are the greatest spellcasters among all dragonkind. I didn't stop at Dragon Hand. I inscribed every 0-level cantrip from the book into my consciousness. Light, Arcane Mark, Detect Magic, Dancing Lights. 9 cantrips total. Most weren't very useful, but one stood out. Arcane Mark. This cantrip lets you place a personal mark on any object, creating a connection with it across great distances. That meant I could finally bury my time-worn treasures, let them accumulate centuries of history, and find them again later. The perfect tool for a time dragon collector. I improved the Arcane Mark cantrip by infusing it with a tiny amount of time power, just 1 breath's worth. But that tiny bit made it impossible to dispel unless someone else could also control time and perceive the river of time. Even better, thanks to the river connecting all planes, I could sense a marked object's location across different worlds. The more time power I poured in, the clearer the connection. After mastering all the cantrips, I turned to Summary of Conjuration and Transmutation Spells. It contained over 20 spell models, mostly levels 1 through 3, with a handful of 4s and 5s. The level 4 transmutation spells were Dragon Breath Mimicry and Enlarge. the same breath-copying spell the two-headed ogre had used against me. The level 4 conjuration spells were Fire Orb and Frost Orb. The only level 5 spell was Thunderstorm, the massive lightning cloud the ogre had conjured before dying. From the spellcasting theory book, I'd learned that magic is divided into 8 schools: abjuration, conjuration, divination, enchantment, evocation, illusion, necromancy, and transmutation. Each school has its own unique runes and incantations, like 8 incredibly deep languages reaching down to the fundamental nature of reality. Most casters spend their entire lives mastering just one school. Even immortal beings need ages to fully understand a single school. Only the most gifted, those truly beloved by the elements, dare study multiple schools. With my time dragon constitution that makes elements obey me like a devoted parent, and my drive to understand all knowledge in existence, I would never limit myself to just one. Based on what I knew now, the two-headed ogre had been a mid-level caster, someone who'd mastered up to 5th level spells. Mid-level covers levels 4 through 6. Below that are lower-level casters with up to 3rd level spells, and above are upper-level casters with 7th through 9th. Beyond all of them stand legendary casters with 10th level spells and above. Even me and my mother fighting together probably couldn't beat a legendary caster. The enlarged spell caught my eye. It could temporarily make me bigger. I looked at my body, beautiful mirror-bright scales, the best-looking dragon around, but still small. I thought about that enormous phantom dragon coiled above the river of time and wondered when I'd reached that mountain-sized form. Then I turned my attention back to the frozen sun god sculpture. I'd been debating what to do with it. Part of me was tempted. That black fog power had given the ogre incredible regeneration, healing fatal wounds in seconds. My dragon body can heal too, but nothing that fast during combat. I wanted to study it. But the smarter part of me recognized the trap. This thing had nearly taken over my mind twice. Researching it meant exposing myself to its influence. Becoming an unwitting follower of some unknown evil god was not acceptable. One moment of greed leading to disaster wasn't worth it. I decided to destroy it. But I wouldn't touch it myself, not even with Dragon Hand. Who knew what other tricks it had? Yuga, come here, I called in giant. He arrived quickly and bowed. I pointed at the frozen sculpture. Carry it outside and smash it. He looked confused and seemed about to ask why, but under my calm gaze, he swallowed his question. As you command, great master. Yuga struggled to lift the frozen sculpture. The thick eyesight sealed around it made it incredibly heavy. He hugged it tight, veins bulging on his forehead, and rushed outside before the cold could give him frostbite, dropping it on an open patch of ground. I noticed something interesting. Yuga had been right next to the sculpture and felt nothing. Earlier, he hadn't been affected by the carved eyes either. But both I and the devoutly religious two-headed ogre had been strongly influenced. Maybe it only targets creatures with spellcasting talent? I shook the thought away. It didn't matter. I was going to destroy it. I stepped outside. The ogres flinched at the sight of me, still shaken from when I'd frozen one of them solid. Yuga raised the black-spiked club high and brought it crashing down on the ice. The impact echoed like thunder. Cracks spiderwebbed across the frozen shell. He kept hammering until he reached the sculpture itself. Then he swung with everything he had. The club bounced off with a metallic clang so violent it split the skin on his hands and nearly flew back into his face. The sculpture didn't have a single scratch. I wasn't surprised. I'd suspected it wouldn't be easy. I turned to the assembled ogres and announced, "Use all your strength and all your brains to destroy this sculpture. Whoever succeeds will receive the blood of a true dragon." Their eyes lit up with greed and excitement. Dragon blood transformation was a prize they all understood. Some were already scheming that if they got it, they could challenge Yuga for the leadership position. Yuga asked for another chance. I nodded. He backed up 20 meters, then charged at full sprint, several tons of muscle-building momentum. At 4 meters out, he leaped high into the air, raised the club above his head, and brought it down with the combined force of his charge and gravity. Even I wouldn't want to take that hit. The ground shook violently. Ice shards exploded everywhere, stinging the watching ogres. But when the dust settled, the sculpture had only been driven 3 feet into the ground. Not a single chip. Not one mark. Yuga's devastating blow had meant nothing to it. I accidentally glanced at the sculpture and felt the pull again, those carved eyes becoming swirling black holes trying to drag my mind in. I broke free instantly and looked away. Yuga apologized, pale-faced and bleeding. I told him simply, You did your best. Then I let the rest of the ogres try. One after another, they attacked with clubs, axes, and raw strength, each one leaving disappointed. Some smarter ogres tried burning it in the campfire or boiling it in their big iron cooking pot. Nothing worked. The sun god sculpture sat there silently, enduring everything they threw at it without a single mark. Troublesome thing, I muttered, looking away from the sculpture to avoid its influence. Physical force clearly wasn't working. I briefly considered just throwing it into some remote crevice, but that felt wasteful. It was connected to a god, after all. If used properly, it might prove useful someday. First, I needed to understand exactly what kinds of creatures it affects. I flew back to my river territory and grabbed one of my ice spirit servants without explanation, then brought it to the ogre settlement. I placed the ice spirit in front of the sculpture and melted the ice seal. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. Then, after about 5 seconds of staring at the carved eyes, the ice spirit's gaze went blank. It started mumbling in that same unknown language I'd heard in my own head. The whispers about the Supreme Sunday. Black mist threads reached out from the sculpture and sank into the ice spirit's transparent body, vanishing completely inside despite its see-through form. I watched carefully. The black fog was dragging elemental energy along with it, making the ice spirit stronger at a rate even faster than my dragon blood transformation had achieved. But what was this energy exactly? Not true divine power. If it were real divine power, even a trace would have killed me instantly during my fight with the two-headed ogre. I let the process finish. When the ice spirit stood up and turned to me, it looked completely normal. Same respectful expression, same weak presence. It still treated me as its master, but I needed to be sure. I ordered it to kill itself. It hesitated, confused, starting to beg. That told me enough. A truly loyal dragon blood servant wouldn't question such an order. The evil god's influence was competing with my own. I cast Dragon Hand and crushed it. Black threads tried to stitch its shattered ice crystal body back together, but I ground it into dust. One strike was all it took. The tiny amount of dark power it had absorbed was nothing against me. I made my decision. I couldn't destroy the sculpture, but I could hide it. I sealed it in fresh ice, placed my time mark on it. My mark penetrated straight through the ice, onto the sculpture itself, and had Yuga and 4 ogres carry it to a deep ice canyon about 40 kilometers away, at least 1,000 meters deep with no life at the bottom. If I ever needed it, I could find it through the time mark. And I already had ideas for how to use it. If some kingdom or church came hunting me, I could drop this thing near their base and let the evil god's mind control do its work. The infected ice spirit had hidden its corruption perfectly. High intelligence and good at pretending to be normal. After dealing with the sculpture, I searched the two-headed ogre's stone house thoroughly, hoping for more spell books. I found nothing in plain sight, so I cast Detect Magic, a cantrip that reveals magical auras on enchanted items. Powerful magic items glow brightly. Legendary spells can even blind weak mages who look at them. As I scanned the room, my eyes stopped on the dead ogre's bed. Magical light was shining through from underneath. The silhouette looked round, like gemstones. I smashed the bed apart with one claw, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Incidentally, the novel, The Libertine Paladin, had mentioned something that captured my imagination. A great arcanist from another world who had traveled across the crystal walls in a magic ship. He came from a civilization called Netheril, described as the pinnacle of magical achievement, a golden age of spellcraft. The title of Great Arcanist was equivalent to Legendary Mage. Someday, I wanted to see places like that for myself. I eagerly grabbed the small wooden box from the hidden compartment. When I tried to crush it open, I felt magical resistance. A spell lock, a 0-level cantrip that prevents non-casters from opening things. Fortunately, there's a matching cantrip called Unlock. I touched the box and willed it open. The magical seal dissolved. Inside were 5 beautiful gemstones the size of pigeon eggs, a red agate, black obsidian, white crystal, and 2 others, all glowing faintly with elemental energy. In this world, magical gemstones aren't just pretty. They attract and store elemental energy, and the longer they exist, the better they get. A top-quality gem can power an entire high-level spell. Living near gemstones also speeds up growth. I picked up the fiery red agate and rubbed it against my face. Then I slowly brought it toward my mouth, hesitating. Should I eat it or save it for my collection? Keeping a gem nearby for 10 years gives better results than swallowing it, and the quality improves over time. But I needed strength now, not later. I wasn't rich enough to collect things yet. My entire treasure hoard was one rusty suit of armor and one rusty sword. Don't blame me, I whispered to the gems. You showed up at the wrong time. I swallowed the red agate. My dragon stomach started dissolving it immediately, converting it into pure magical energy that flowed through every part of my body like warm waves. It felt incredible. I gave up any hesitation, tipped the box, and dumped all 4 remaining gems into my mouth at once. 5 magical gemstones later, my eyes grew heavy. A familiar drowsiness was creeping in, not from tiredness, but from my body having absorbed enough energy to trigger another growth sleep. Though it felt like I was just slightly short of the threshold. I'd planned to study the conjuration and transmutation spells from the book, but growth sleep was still the fastest way to increase my power. The spells could wait. I called all the ogres together and asked if anyone had more gemstones hidden anywhere. Whoever gave them up would be rewarded. But the 2-headed ogre had already collected everything. Those 5 were all that existed here. I verified with detect magic, scanning the entire settlement. Nothing. The ogres weren't lying, which was lucky for them. Hiding gems from me would have cost them their lives. Yuga, from now on, if anyone finds gemstones anywhere, get them to me by any means necessary, I ordered. If it's beyond your ability, notify me immediately. Before leaving, I told Yuga to build me a dragon den inside the valley, sized for an adult dragon, not my current body. He hesitated. Master, we don't have many ogres and a den that large. I only want results. I cut him off. He went pale and shut up. I softened slightly and added that I'd give dragon blood transformation to a few of his strongest ogres. A single ogre could already beat 5 ice spirits. After transformation, they'd be strong enough to hunt large magical creatures for me. Yuga was thrilled about the dragon blood transformation. I converted 6 ogres total, including Yuga, the biggest and strongest of the tribe. The transformation wouldn't show results immediately. They'd need to sleep through it first, like dragons do, and wake up as true dragon blood creatures. I was curious to see what dragon blood ogres would look like, but that would have to wait. I flew back to my river territory. Nobody in the Ice Spirit village cared about the missing one I'd taken for my experiment. They understood what it meant to serve a chromatic dragon. Being my servant sounded nicer than what it really was. They were slaves with a fancier title, and I had the power of life and death over them. A hunting party had just returned with 3 massive yaks. Some white hounds ran up to me, rolling onto their backs for belly scratches. These round, blue-furred creatures with oversized jaws full of razor teeth could also breathe cold wind. They bred fast, from 50 to over 100 in just 2 months, and had become the backbone of my hunting teams. I carefully scratched their bellies with my claws, trying not to accidentally gut them, then tossed them some meat. I ate all 3 yaks, but instead of feeling full, my body demanded even more. I was right at the edge of triggering another growth sleep and needed just a bit more energy. The other hunting parties weren't back yet, so I dove into the river and went on a rampage, chasing down every ice river shark I could find. These delicious fish had been my favorite treat, and I'd been trying to eat them sustainably. But today, driven by overwhelming hunger, I wiped them out almost entirely. I felt a bit guilty about that. After the last shark went down, the drowsiness became impossible to resist. I swam to my underwater den, curled up on my ice bed with my rusty armor and sword held close, and fell into deep sleep. Hopefully this time I'll gain a new time ability. While I slept, far to the south, hundreds of kilometers past mountain ranges and dense forests, beyond the Great Barrier Mountains, war was tearing apart the human kingdoms. The Daimer Kingdom was collapsing. After its chief legendary mage died of old age, the duchies under its banner turned on each other. The Masha Duchy had attacked the Vogue Duchy, even hiring a red dragon to tip the battle. The Vogue capital was falling, its streets filled with elite cavalry slaughtering civilians. An old mage wrapped in fiery magical light burst from the besieged castle, carrying 2 terrified children, a boy and a girl. The enemy's skylock spell couldn't hold him. 2 high-level mages from the Masha side gave chase, and the desperate flight pushed deeper and deeper northward. A month of heavy blizzards hit the frozen north. Most creatures hid in their dens. The river froze over with ice thick enough for the multi-ton terror lizards to run on. The ice spirits loved this weather. All that concentrated water element made them stronger. But the fire-type terror lizards were sluggish and sleepy from the cold. With me asleep, at least nobody needed to go hunting. After 1 month of deep sleep, I woke up. My dragons might burst out involuntarily, freezing every creature in the area stiff. I shook the last fog of sleep from my head and looked around. My den felt smaller, much smaller. The ceiling I used to have plenty of clearance under, I could now almost touch just by standing upright. I hadn't shrunk the den. I had grown. Using the ice crystal walls as a mirror, I examined myself. My white scales were still flawless and mirror-bright, but now they looked more fierce and imposing. Bony spikes had appeared along my face plates, arms, and tail. And most exciting of all, I had horns. For dragon horns, 2 large ones extending backward from above my eyes, and 2 smaller ones growing alongside them. White dragons normally don't have horns at all. Not me, not my siblings, not even my mother. These were a time dragon trait. Then I checked my size and was stunned. I had jumped from 8 meters to 12 meters in a single sleep. I was now classified as a large dragon. Dragon sizes have clear categories. 6 to 10 meters is medium, 10 to 18 is large, and 18 to 30 is super large. My mother was 16 meters, also large, a size that young white dragons reach. Because white dragons are the weakest, she wouldn't reach super large until well past her prime. I was now in the same size category as my mother, and I was less than 2 years old. I flexed my body, feeling the surging power inside. I was pretty sure I could take her in a fight now. Even if my body was still slightly smaller, my time acceleration alone meant she wouldn't be able to touch my tail tip. She was a pure white dragon, strong body, frost breath, dragon's might, but nothing else. Compared to my arsenal of time manipulation, plunder time thread, spells, and superior speed, she was honestly limited. That's just what white dragons are. Even fully grown, they aren't that impressive. Evil thoughts started creeping in. I remembered the day she attacked me and drove me out. That blow to my chest. The crack in my scales. Not a word of warmth in our entire time together. Time to pay her a visit, I thought, eyes narrowing. If I can beat her, I'll take 60% of her treasure hoard. I was being generous, actually. She'd sheltered me for over a year during my most vulnerable time, so I'd leave her 40% as repayment. A real evil dragon would take everything without a second thought. I set that plan aside for now and focused on assessing my growth. This sleep had been a massive upgrade. Had I passed from hatchling to juvenile stage? By real-world time, I was still under 2 years old, technically a hatchling. But time flows differently on my body. Every moment I use acceleration, I'm experiencing more time than everyone else. My actual biological age was probably much higher. I decided not to overthink it. I'd just count my age by real time and move on. I opened my eyes wide and looked at the river of time, invisible to normal sight and undetectable by magic. I took a deep breath. The phantom river water flowed into my body, mixed with the real river water, and this single breath absorbed more time energy than 4 or 5 breaths used to. My connection to the river of time had grown much stronger. I spent a full day in my den exploring my new capabilities. I love this process, peeling back the unknown layer by layer, revealing the truth underneath. When I finally burst through the frozen river surface and emerged into the blizzard, snowflakes hit my scales but couldn't stick, sliding right off. I had 2 reasons for coming out. First, I'd finished cataloging my new abilities. Second, the much simpler reason, I was starving. A month of deep sleep had burned through everything, and I was ready to chew dirt. Thankfully, I told the ice spirits beforehand to freeze several giant yaks for me. The meat wasn't fresh and the flavor had suffered, but hunger kills pickiness. I called my servants with a dragon's roar and had them bring everything over. When they saw me, they were shocked. 12 meters long, for horns, covered in fierce spikes. I looked nothing like the dragon who'd gone to sleep. Their awe deepened visibly. As Dragonblood servants, my growth meant their growth too, so they were genuinely happy. Your wings will cover the entire frozen north. Your name will echo across the continent. A bit over the top, but I won't lie. Being praised like that while wolfing down frozen yak felt pretty good. After eating, I told Roy Ice River to reorganize the hunting teams and resume operations. The blizzard actually made the ice spirit stronger, so they could hunt with just the white hounds while the cold-weakened terror lizard stayed home. Then I asked Roy to show me his current strength. He ripped off his own left arm and instantly reshaped it into a sharp ice crystal spear, while his arm regenerated from fresh ice growth. He charged at me, unleashing a storm of hundreds of ice needles followed by a full-power spear thrust. The ice needles shattered harmlessly against my scales. The spear struck my claw, and its tip cracked without leaving more than a tiny white dot on my armor. His power was roughly equivalent to a second-level mage now, a massive improvement from the pathetic ice dagger of a few months ago. I didn't praise him or scold him. I just gave a flat, unreadable response that clearly made him nervous. Good. A little pressure keeps servants motivated. I told him to shift hunting priorities toward magical creatures and larger beasts. Regular animal meat couldn't provide enough nutrition for me anymore. I needed flesh infused with elemental energy to fuel my next growth cycle. Roy promised solemnly not to disappoint me. Then I spread my wings and vanished into the blizzard. The stored food had only taken the edge off my hunger. I needed to hunt magical creatures myself and test my new abilities in real combat. Under the dark sky, blizzard snow fell endlessly across the frozen north. I flew several hundred meters up, scanning the white world below. In this weather, even my vision was limited, so I used detect magic instead of my eyes. Most magical creatures have elemental energy flowing in their blood that shows up as a magical glow to spellcasters. This method isn't perfect. Some creatures can hide their glow, and true dragons are almost invisible to detection because our scales block magical scanning. The rule of thumb is, if you notice a dragon nearby, it already noticed you first. I headed south where the weather was milder and prey more plentiful. With my current strength, 12 meters long, the body of a young adult white dragon, plus all my time dragon abilities, I could honestly rampage across the continent if I wanted. But there was no need. As long as the frozen north could feed me, I'd stay here. I passed over many ordinary beasts and even some ferocious species. Mutant animals with incredible physical power, but no magical abilities. One was a 10-meter-long white tiger, basically a giant Arctic silver tabby cat. It tensed up when it saw me, ready to fight. Arctic silver tabby. Impressive size, I thought, but kept flying. Ferocious species are tough to hunt. Their meat lacks elemental energy, and they aren't worth the trouble compared to actual magical creatures. About 12 minutes later, a bright magical glow caught my attention through the snowstorm. I looked down and spotted a massive Arctic dire bear, white-furred, thick-bodied, with hair like steel needles. It was even bigger than the one my mother had brought home as our first meal. Standing upright, it would reach 9 meters tall, a true giant. The memory of that first taste of magical creature meat rushed back. The chewy, delicious bear paw. My mouth started watering instantly. Normally, these bears are incredibly aggressive, always fighting or looking for a fight. But this one just took a defensive stance and growled a warning instead of charging. That was a bit unusual, but I didn't think much of it. I locked my eyes on the bear, took a deep breath, and activated my time power. Acceleration mode, 5 times speed. This was my new upgraded limit, up from the previous 3 times. My wings beat once, and my body became a white streak, punching through the curtain of snow like a bullet. At 5 times speed, no ordinary creature could even see my shadow. I closed the distance in an instant, appearing right in front of the Arctic dire bear before it could react. The bear's instincts let it spot me at the last second, but it was too late. My claws punched through its shoulder, tearing through fur and flesh down to bone. I grabbed it and sent it crashing hundreds of meters across the snow, carving a long trench through the ground. When it recovered, instead of swiping at me, the bear slammed its paw into the ground. Elemental energy erupted everywhere. Dozens of massive ice spikes, each over 10 meters long, shot up from the earth around it, stabbing toward me. One hit my scales with a metallic clang and snapped. I pulled back quickly. My body armor held fine with just minor cracks, but my wings are less protected, and I didn't want them damaged over something this simple. I frowned. I'd actually overestimated this fight. My 5 times acceleration alone was enough to crush most magical creatures. I didn't even need my new time ability. But the bear charged at me anyway, coating itself in ice armor covered with jagged spikes. Even knowing it was outmatched, it attacked head-on, truly living up to its name. The dire bear was fearless and furious. I decided to test my new power anyway. I landed directly in its path and waited. The moment it stepped within 20 meters of me, I activated it. Time stop. Everything inside a 20-meter sphere around me froze instantly. Snowflakes hung motionless in the air. Wind stopped. Sound died. The bear was locked mid-charge, hot breath frozen in a cloud before its snarling face. Outside the sphere, the blizzard continued normally, two different worlds separated by an invisible wall. Snow piled up at the boundary's edge where it hit the frozen zone and stopped. Time stop drains my time power like water through a broken dam, so I didn't waste a second. I blasted the paralyzed bear point blank with frost breath, encasing it completely in thick ice. It couldn't dodge, couldn't resist, just a stationary target eating the full force of my breath weapon. I shut off time stop, wincing at the cost. Wind and snow resumed instantly. The bear never understood what happened. Its consciousness was still stuck in the moment it was charging toward me. It died in the ice without pain, without even knowing. I estimated the sphere's diameter scales with my age, about 10 meters per year. The energy cost was higher than plunder time breath, but the effect was devastatingly powerful. Anyone caught inside was completely helpless until my reserves ran out. Mother dearest, I thought with a grin spreading across my face, I'm coming for you soon. After confirming that 5 times speed plus time stop could definitely defeat my still not adult mother, I walked toward my kill to eat. That's when I heard 2 faint whimpers through the wind. I turned around. Back where I'd first struck the bear, 2 tiny cubs lay exposed in the blizzard, barely the size of small dogs, eyes not even fully open, shivering and crying. Everything clicked. The bear's strange behavior, why it didn't run, why it charged straight at me even knowing it would die. I had been standing between it and its babies. It wasn't being reckless. It was protecting them. I thought about my own mother, who'd attacked me and thrown me out without a word of warmth. If she'd been in this bear's situation, she would have flown away without a backward glance. Evil dragons and their paper-thin family bonds. I walked over to the cubs and spread my wings above them, blocking the wind and snow. They crawled blindly through the snow until they bumped against my foot. Not much meat on them anyway, I muttered. Might as well raise them. Their intelligence is about the same as the terror lizards. I picked up both cubs in my claws, grabbed their frozen mother's body with my hind legs, and flew toward the ogre's settlement. I didn't know any warming spells, and these little ones could freeze to death quickly. Their fur was still too thin. The ogre valley had buildings to block wind and campfires for warmth. I could drop them off there and check on my new den's construction progress at the same time. I returned to the ogre's settlement through the blizzard. The valley's bowl shape usually blocks the weather, but this storm was too powerful. Everything was buried in white. Most ogres were hiding indoors, but 5 stood out in the snow, completely unbothered by the cold. These were my dragon blood ogres. They'd changed dramatically. Each one had grown past 3 meters tall, breaking the normal ogre height limit. Yuga was the biggest at 3.5 meters, packed with even more muscle than before. Silver-white scales dotted their skin, radiating cold energy, not as strong as dragon scales, but far tougher than any ordinary creature's armor. They'd also become magical creatures, with elemental energy flowing through their blood. My dragon blood had given them ice-type spell-like abilities, though once again, no time powers, only white dragon traits transferred. I dropped the 2 bear cubs and told the ogres to keep them warm and fed. They found a nursing female ogre to take care of them. Meanwhile, I devoured the entire adult dire bear, every scrap of meat, bone, and skin. That rich, chewy, elemental-infused meat finally killed the hunger that had been gnawing at me since waking up. Yuga led me to the new dragon den they'd built into the stone wall at the valley's edge, about 50 meters up. Inside, it was bright and spacious, walls coated in ice crystal, with a large ice bed at the back, modeled after my mother's nest, just as I'd requested. But standing there now, I realized I wouldn't need it. The height was too low, only 50 meters, and after discovering I could beat my mother in a fight, a much better plan had formed in my mind. I was going to take her nest, the one on the 1,000-meter ice cliff with the sweeping view of the entire frozen north. She'd thrown me out with violence and not a shred of affection. Now I'd return the favor. Somewhere far away, in that very cliff nest, my mother was looking after my 3 siblings when she suddenly felt uneasy, glancing around suspiciously. Dragon intuition is rarely wrong. I curled up on the ice bed, wrapped my tail forward as a pillow, folded my wings around myself like a cocoon, and dozed off to the white noise of the blizzard. When I woke 3 days later, I stretched my back in a long, satisfying yawn and planned to check on the bear cubs first. But as I walked to the den's edge, I froze. My time power was stirring on its own, agitated. I looked at the river of time, normally calm and steady, and saw clear ripples forming close to my position. Something was disturbing the flow of time itself, right near me. My body tensed instantly. I locked my eyes on the ripples, every muscle ready. What's happening? A second later, the rippling river of time smoothed into a mirror-like surface, showing me a scene that made my jaw drop. It was a hatchling dragon, desperately watching its dragon mother approaching the cave, panicking because it had secretly eaten one of her gemstones and hadn't finished digesting it. I recognized that feeling instantly. The pounding heart, the racing thoughts. I'd lived through that exact moment myself. The hatchling was reaching out through time, unconsciously using temporal dragon reversal to beg its future self for help. But here's what shocked me. It wasn't a white dragon. It was a red dragon hatchling. Fire-red scales, small horns, and, unmistakably, a ring of black scales around its wrist. Platinum eyes, just like mine. Its mother was a massive red dragon, far bigger and more powerful than my white dragon mother. The nest wasn't on any ice cliff. It was inside a volcano, with lava flowing below and heat-distorted air shimmering everywhere. How could I be the future of a red dragon? We weren't even the same species. But time was running out for the little red dragon. Its mother was getting closer, and if she caught it, there'd be consequences. I knew exactly how that felt. I stopped overthinking and decided to help. I channeled my time power into the ripples. In the red hatchling's timeline, time froze. My power took the form of a white dragon that swam upstream through the river of time, appeared before the startled red hatchling, then dissolved into its body as a flash of light, accelerating the gemstone's absorption. I watched its eyes go blank with that familiar dazed look, the moment of receiving the time dragon inheritance. Despite the different body, different birthplace, different species, every reaction, every expression, every little habit was unmistakably me. The same soul. The ripples faded. I was left standing in my den with more questions than answers. Different timelines of me. Don't always become white dragons. Maybe somewhere there was a gold version of me, a silver version, or even a pure legendary time dragon born naturally. I thought about the enormous dragon phantom I'd seen coiled above the river of time on my first day. Ash-gray scales, 12 rings of black scales, nothing like my current white dragon body. I'd been so certain that was my future form. Now I wasn't sure anymore. Temporal dragon reversal apparently doesn't just connect to your own timeline. It reaches across different ones. After pacing my den for half an hour, I settled on an explanation. Every choice a living being makes creates a branch. The river of time has countless tributaries, like stars in the sky. Only the present me is real. The future is just possibility. It might happen, it might not. Then I noticed the cost. My body had shrunk slightly. My time power and magic reserves had dropped noticeably. Time on my body had actually reversed a little. I'd paid for lending power across timelines with a piece of my own growth. That stung. So I tried something. If lending time to the past cost me, maybe I could borrow from my own future to recover. I activated Temporal Dragon Reversal, sending my request forward through the river. Nothing. Not a single ripple. Complete silence. Just like every other time I tried since that very first day when my future self had helped me as a newborn. Every attempt since then had failed. I sighed. My future self was a cheapskate who refused to lend me anything, ever. I'd been cursing that stingy future version of me for a long time. But now, having just experienced the cost of lending across timelines firsthand, I made a silent vow. From now on, unless a past version of me was facing an actual life or death crisis, I wouldn't lend either. My future self won't lend to me? Fine. Then I won't lend to my past self. Fair is fair. The power of time. Truly mysterious. I wonder when I'll truly understand and master it. I shook my head and decided to stop worrying about what I couldn't figure out yet. I'd think about it when I understood the river of time better. I went to check on the 2 bear cubs first. In just a few days, the ogres had taken excellent care of them. Warm animal skin beds, a campfire burning nearby, a female ogre nursing them. The little things had already gotten plump and round. Magical creatures really are something. They adapted fast, even without their own kind. When I appeared, the cubs recognized my scent from when I'd shielded them from the blizzard. They scrambled over on all fours and rubbed against my claws. Their baby fur was long, soft, and silky, completely different from their mother's steel needle hair. I couldn't stop stroking them. though I had to be extremely careful not to accidentally stab them with my sharp claws. They wouldn't be useful as fighters by the time they grew up. Dire bears take 30 years to mature, and by then I'd be far beyond needing that level of strength. They'd just be pets. But in this barren wasteland with zero entertainment, having something soft to play with was a small luxury. I told Yuga to start hunting magical creatures as my main food supply going forward, then spread my wings and vanished into the blizzard with a huge grin on my face. Mother dearest, here I come. I flew north with purpose, excitement building in my chest. I passed over my river territory where most of the ice spirits were out hunting for me. Having servants was working out perfectly. No more spending all my time chasing food. I knew my mother's habits well. In heavy snow like this, she'd be sleeping in her cliff nest, probably even forgetting to feed my siblings. She had no idea her oldest son was on his way back. My eyes glowed thinking about her treasure hoard. That small mountain of magical gemstones she'd been hoarding for years without ever eating them. My collection was about to get very, very full. Though I did wonder, how had a lazy teenage dragon who spent most of her time sleeping accumulated so much wealth? She never went raiding. She barely left her nest. Where did it all come from? A gift from our father during courtship? No way. Evil dragons would rather bleed out than give away treasure. I couldn't figure it out and stopped trying. Soon I spotted the familiar territory. The blizzard had transformed the landscape into something almost unrecognizable, but I'd lived here for a year and a half. I knew every corner, and I could feel her presence. That faint dragon's might that naturally forms when a true dragon lives somewhere long enough. I tapped my claws together. They rang like metal striking metal. My claws were itching for action. Ignoring the subtle warning embedded in her territorial aura, I marched straight in, head held high, the howling wind and raging snow swirling around me as I advanced toward the ice cliff nest, step by determined step. I charged through the blizzard toward the ice cliff nest, making no effort to hide my approach. I wanted my mother to see me coming and watch her reaction, but she didn't appear. She was sleeping too deeply to notice. 3 small white shapes poked out from the nest edge, my siblings. They flew out and froze when they saw me. Compared to my 12-meter body, they were still barely 3 meters long, pathetic little things. Garen? Is that you? Charles stammered. Already forgot me. I flexed a claw that could crush any of them with a single swat. Do I need to remind you how to address your elder brother? They glanced at each other nervously under the crushing pressure of my presence. Years of beatings had trained them well. Brother Garen, they said in unison. Hill gathered some courage and asked why I'd come back. Mother expelled you. If she finds you here, she'll beat you up. Beat me up? We'd see about that. I looked past them at the nest. Go wake her. Tell her Garen has returned. They hesitated. I narrowed my eyes. They scrambled back inside. Minutes later, they returned through the blizzard, struggling to fly straight. She's sleeping too deeply. We can't wake her, same as always. Never responding to her children's calls. Stand aside, I told them. Don't be in front of me. They didn't understand until I opened my mouth and ice blue light began gathering inside. Even as white dragons with natural cold resistance, they felt the bone-chilling power radiating from my breath and scrambled away in panic. I fired. My frost breath tore through the air and struck the cave entrance, forming clusters of sharp ice crystals at the impact point. Deep inside, my mother's eyes snapped open. She exploded out of the cave with a furious roar, her 16-meter body smashing through my ice formations like they were nothing. How dare you invade the territory of the great white dragon Salia? Then she saw me. Her charge stuttered. Shock filled her yellow eyes. She recognized me. The black scale ring, the platinum eyes, but couldn't believe the size. When she'd thrown me out 6 months ago, I was 6 meters long. Now I was 12. She tilted her head and cautiously asked if it was really me. It's me, I said flatly. I'm back. Her shock faded quickly, replaced by cold indifference. This is my territory. You may be my blood, but you are not welcome. Leave. Now. She wasn't afraid. I was still smaller than her 16 meters. Frost poured from her nostrils in warning. I laughed, a booming dragon laugh that shook the falling snow. Then I stopped, my gaze sharp as a blade. I'll leave. But first, I'd like you to give me 80% of the treasure in your nest. Hand it over, and I'll go peacefully. I paused, letting the words sink in. Otherwise, don't blame me for taking it by force. Originally, I'd planned to ask for only 60%, leaving the rest as gratitude for sheltering me during my first year. But seeing her cold, dismissive attitude again, the old anger flared up. I changed my mind on the spot. What did you say? My mother froze for a moment. Then her eyes went cold. Her dragon's might, nearly adult level, erupted outward, sending a visible ring of disturbed snowflakes racing toward me. I stood my ground and let it wash over me. For half a second, I felt the crushing pressure of a top predator's will. Then I shook it off like nothing. I said, give me 80% of your treasure. If I have to take it myself, I won't leave you a single gem or coin. I spread my wings to full span, raised my head high with all four horns pointing at the sky, and released my own dragon's might right back at her. Between true dragons, releasing dragon's might at each other is a clear signal. A fight is about to start. She stared at me hard. So you're after my treasure. I was absolutely right to drive you out. Her eyes turned dangerous. Half a year of growth has given you confidence, but the gap in age can't be closed by growing fast. I'll teach you a lesson today, my foolish firstborn. One you'll remember in blood. Challenging an older dragon is the stupidest thing you can do. She was a pure evil dragon through and through. Violent, selfish, cold. The moment she knew I wanted her hoard, her patience evaporated. She raised her neck, scales gleaming, and cast wind creation, a spell-like ability only near-adult white dragons can use. A massive hurricane dozens of meters wide spun to life, shredding snowflakes and roaring toward me like a wall of invisible blades. I activated 5 times speed and shot straight up like a white bolt, vanishing into the blizzard just before the storm could swallow me. I moved faster than the wind itself. My mother blinked. Where did I go? Her arrogance had made her think one attack would settle this. Losing sight of me clearly unsettled her. I was 500 meters above her, hidden in a fog cloud, looking down. I took a deep breath and gathered my frost breath. She was the strongest creature I'd ever fought, and I wasn't going to underestimate her, but I also wasn't going to use plunder time breath. I wanted to humiliate her, not kill her. I folded my wings and dropped. A white meteor plummeting at 200 meters per second, spinning as I fell. 2 seconds later, she sensed the pressure from above and looked up, but I was already less than 100 meters away, mouth wide open, ice blue energy churning inside. I unleashed my frost breath straight down onto her. The blue torrent slammed into her body like a waterfall, packed with razor-sharp ice spikes and crushing force, driving her into the ground. She couldn't dodge, too close, too fast. If she weren't a white dragon with high cold resistance, that single blast would have half-killed her. Even so, she was in bad shape, body half covered in ice crystal clusters, scales scratched all over from the ice projectiles, buried in a meter of snow. When she realized her own 2-year-old hatchling had just knocked her out of the sky with one attack, I could see the humiliation burning in her eyes. A dragon being beaten down by her own child is the ultimate disgrace. Her pride was on fire. She let out a furious, ear-splitting roar. And I felt wonderful. A heavy stone that had been sitting on my chest since the day she attacked me and threw me out, it finally lifted. Salia, I called down to her, hovering overhead with my wings spread wide, deliberately using her first name with zero respect. Are all adult dragons this weak? Or is it just you? That pushed her over the edge. She exploded out of the snow with a deafening roar, launched herself skyward, and slashed at me with her claws, eyes burning with rage. My mother came at me like a dragon-shaped fighter jet, all howling wind and savage power. Her raw strength was greater than mine. At her age, her body was her best weapon, and white dragon claws are wider and sharper than other dragons, designed to grip ice and tear through flesh and bone. When I saw her eyes go calm and calculating, the anger vanishing completely, I knew she'd gotten serious. A white dragon fighting on pure hunting instinct is genuinely dangerous. She charged. I shot upward at 5 times speed, punched through the blizzard, then curved in a tight arc to get behind her. She spun around instantly, eyes locked on me. I fired my frost breath at her wings. But she'd learned from the first hit. Her battle instincts kicked in, and she dodged at the last moment. Then she opened her own mouth, and a much larger, much more powerful cone of frost breath erupted toward me. Way stronger than mine. Nearly adult dragon power is no joke. Her breath was too fast even for my 5 times speed to outrun. She tracked me as I dodged sideways, the massive cone of ice blue energy sweeping after me, leaving trails of frozen crystals hanging in the air, steadily cutting off my escape routes. I made my move. I stopped dead, turned toward her, and dove straight at her. right through the gap beside her breath attack, closing the distance instead of running. She looked confused for just a moment. I grinned at her. Then I activated time stop. Everything within 20 meters of me froze. My mother hung motionless in the air, face still wearing that puzzled expression. Her frost breath was suspended mid-blast, every individual ice crystal visible and still. Snowflakes and wind, all frozen in place. I couldn't waste a second. I shot behind her. Time resumed. Wind howled again. My mother blinked, confused. I'd been right in front of her, and now I was gone. Then she heard my wing beats directly behind her, close enough to touch. Before she could react, I clenched both claws into fists, raised them high, and smashed them down on the top of her skull. The impact cracked scales on her head and rattled her brain. She let out a pained cry, her vision blurring, body swaying like a drunk as she lost control and crashed into the snow below, pressing the thick snowpack into a dragon-shaped slab of ice. Still not strong enough, I thought. Should have knocked her out cold with that. I didn't give her time to recover. I dove like a cannonball, slammed into her body, and flipped her entire 16-meter frame through the air. Snow exploded in every direction as two massive dragons tumbled across the ground. While she was still dazed, I pinned her down in the snow and started punching her head. Left hook, right hook, left hook, over and over. My fists at 5 times speed fell like a jackhammer, each one snapping her head from side to side. Heavy thuds echoed across the frozen landscape without stopping. The only reason she survived this barrage was a quirk of my acceleration. It speeds up time around me, but doesn't multiply the actual force behind each hit. If my punches carried momentum matching their speed, 2 blows would have finished her. Under my relentless barrage of punches, my mother looked pitiful and helpless. She tried multiple times to use her spell-like abilities to escape, but I interrupted her every time. When you're getting pummeled and your concentration keeps breaking, even abilities that don't need incantations become impossible to cast. After about 15 seconds, she'd had enough of the humiliation. Fighting through the dizziness, she forced her mouth open and aimed it at me. I tensed, ready to use time stop, but instead of frost breath, her tongue curled up from underneath and produced a scroll. A spell scroll with a strong magical glow. Whatever was stored inside was probably a high-level spell, her last resort, her hidden trump card. I wasn't going to let her use it. Time stop. The blizzard froze. My mother hung motionless, mouth half open, her pink tongue wrapped around the scroll, eyes burning with desperate fury. I reached past her rows of jagged teeth, pulled the scroll right out of her mouth, and got dragon saliva all over my claw in the process. The scroll itself was perfectly clean, made from some special material, smooth as silk. Time resumed. She didn't know anything had happened. A triumphant grin spread across her face. "Garen, you can't possibly beat me," she roared. Then her tongue felt empty. The grin froze on her face as she frantically searched her mouth. Nothing. I smiled and opened my claw, showing her the yellowish scroll. Looking for this? She lunged to grab it. I smacked her head sideways with one claw. She had nothing left. "You didn't even notice when I took it," I said with mock pity. "Salia, you're so weak. How did you produce someone as exceptional as me?" She stared at me, shaking with shame and rage. Tears were actually forming in her eyes. She was still young by dragon standards, a teenage girl, emotionally. This was too much for her to handle. You. Before she could finish, her eyes rolled back and she collapsed unconscious. The accumulated punishment to her skull had finally reached its limit. I picked up her limp body. She was heavier than me, which took some effort, and flew her back into the cliff nest. My 3 siblings had watched everything from a distance, expressions frozen in disbelief. "Mother, got knocked out by Garen," Charles gulped. "How did he grow so fast?" Tom said, looking envious. "I'm remembering bad things," Hill said, her body aching from phantom pains of past beatings. They exchanged nervous glances, old fears flooding back, and didn't dare enter the nest. Inside, I set my mother down and looked around. The familiar ice crystal walls, the spacious cave, it all felt right. This place suits me best. It's mine now. I dreamed of revenge for months, but now that I'd actually won, I wasn't sure what to do with her. Eat her gems in front of her face? Tell her I'd stolen one on my very first day alive? Beat up her other kids? My scheming was interrupted by the treasure pile. Crystals, agates, jade, diamonds, gems of every color, magical weapons, fine armor, all reflecting off the mirror-like ice walls, flooding my eyes with sparkle. My eyes lit up. I punched my mother's head one more time to make sure she'd stay unconscious, then turned to admire my new fortune. But as I looked more carefully, my excitement faded into confusion. There were so many gems, yet the elemental energy in the air didn't feel concentrated enough to match this quantity. Something was off. I walked closer and pawed through the outer layer. Gems tumbled and clinked against each other, the most beautiful sound in the world. But the mystery remained. When the outer layer of gems tumbled away, I finally saw the truth, and it left me speechless. The real gemstones were only a thin shell on the outside. The inside was mostly filled with tusks from mammoths, large ice plain beasts called force mammoths that lived in herds of hundreds within my mother's territory. The tusks were smooth and shiny, sure, but they were just teeth. Alongside them were irregular ice crystals she'd made with her own frost breath, pretending to be rare magical gems. My mother had faked the size of her treasure hoard. She was a vain dragon who'd even fooled herself. I wanted to ask her how she'd been sleeping at night all these years. So even dragons pretend to be richer than they are, I muttered, feeling genuinely cheated. When I'd stolen that crystal as a newborn, if I'd just grabbed a few more, I would have discovered this embarrassing secret much earlier. But back then my elemental senses were too weak to notice. I sighed and started carefully counting the real magical gemstones one by one. Soon my mother stirred and woke up. The instant she saw me sorting through her gems, she screamed, "My gems! Garen, don't touch my gems!" She lunged at me, wobbling and unsteady. I flicked my tail and smacked her into the ice wall. She slumped against it, whimpering quietly. I gathered all the real gems in my arms, buried my face in them, took a deep, satisfying breath, then turned to face her. "Salia, you haven't accepted reality yet. You lost. On the frozen north, the strong take from the weak. This nest, these treasures, they changed owners the moment I defeated you." Her eyes started getting misty again. She'd spent over 50 years collecting these few real gems, kidnapping small kingdom princesses, robbing human merchant caravans. All that effort, and now her own son was taking everything. But dragon pride wouldn't let her cry. I swept the worthless mammoth tusks and fake ice crystals over to her with my tail. "I'm curious," I said with a knowing look. "Why did you mix tusks and ice crystals in with your gems? Was it to make your hoard look bigger?" She froze. Then her face flushed with embarrassment, momentarily forgetting her anger about losing her treasure. I just happened to like tusks as much as gems. I wasn't trying to make my hoard look fuller. Don't make things up." I nodded graciously and didn't push further. No need to completely destroy her fragile vanity. "Since you like them so much, you can keep all the tusks and ice crystals. Consider it repayment for sheltering me during my first year." I pushed the pile toward her with a magnanimous expression. "You? I. She couldn't bring herself to beg for real gems back. Dragon pride wouldn't allow it. She'd actually robbed weaker young white dragons herself before, so she understood how this worked. The strong take, the weak accept. She just never imagined being robbed by her own 2-year-old child. She stared at my 12-meter body, looking dazed. "This is 2 years old." I gave her my final terms. "Take your things, collect Hill and the others, and leave. The cliff nest and this territory are mine now." I paused, then added, "But unlike you, I won't be heartless about it. You're allowed to enter my territory and hunt here, as long as you pay an appropriate fee." My mother glared at me, but flinched when she saw my fist twitch. Her head was still throbbing from the beating. She managed one last defiant line. "Everything I've lost, I'll take back someday." "Don't get too cocky, Garen." I'd actually been about to give her one gem back, to repay the one I'd stolen as a newborn. But after hearing that threat, I put it right back in my pile. "I'll be waiting. But don't blame me for what happens." As a time dragon, I was absolutely confident. Anyone I'd already surpassed would never catch up. The gap between us would only grow wider with time. She reluctantly gathered her mammoth tusks and fake ice crystals, then walked to the cave's edge. She looked back at me one last time with a resentful glance, but I was too busy admiring my new treasures to care. She flew off into the blizzard with my 3 siblings trailing behind her. As she left, I could practically hear her thinking dark thoughts. When she saw the 3 hatchlings, her mood worsened. They reminded her that Garen was her firstborn. I'd secretly placed a time mark on the tip of her tail before she left. In my mind, I could track a small dot of light moving steadily northeast. She had a clear destination in mind. She wasn't lost at all. Now for inventory. 76 magical gemstones of various colors and elements, all glowing with magical energy. Being near them made breathing feel wonderful. My magic flowed faster, and I absorbed elemental energy much more efficiently, like stepping from a stuffy closet into a wide-open meadow. There were also enough fine steel armor and weapons, all stamped with what looked like a tulip pattern, to equip 100 soldiers. My mother must have raided a human military unit at some point. Nice craftsmanship, but useless to me since none of my servants were human-sized. Then I turned to the real prize, spell scrolls. 47 in total, stacked in a pyramid shape, weakest at the bottom, strongest at the top. The brightest glow came from the scroll I'd snatched from my mother's mouth. A pale yellow scroll marked with the symbol of the evocation school, the most directly destructive. Branch of magic. The classic evocation spell is Fireball, which some mages spend their entire careers creating variants of: giant fireballs, explosive fireballs, lava fireballs. Even legendary tier versions exist. Written beneath the symbol in common language. 7th level spell, Savage Vortex. 7th level. That's high-tier magic. Casters who master high-level spells are rare and powerful enough to rival adult dragons in combat. If my mother had actually managed to use this scroll during our fight, I would have been in serious trouble. I carefully placed it under my tongue, just like she'd done, keeping it as my own hidden trump card. Where had she gotten a 7th level scroll? Probably a gift from my unknown father during courtship. That actually seemed plausible. It was the kind of valuable gift that might convince a dragon. The remaining 46 scrolls covered all schools of magic, but were mostly lower level. 1 5th level, 3 4th level, and the rest between 1st and 3rd. The lower ones weren't particularly exciting, but the mid-level scrolls would definitely come in handy. If my mother had carried a few of those mid-level scrolls with her when she left the nest, the fight would have been much harder. She underestimated me. I moved all 76 magical gemstones onto the ice bed and lay down on top of them. Dragon scales are hard enough that the gemstone's edges actually feel comfortable rather than painful. For dragons, a bed of gems is the best mattress there is. My only complaint was that there weren't enough to cover the whole bed. This time I chose not to eat any gems. With enough of them gathered together, they attract elemental energy so effectively that keeping them nearby long-term is far more valuable than swallowing them. I wasn't desperate anymore. With acceleration, plunder time breath, and time stop in my arsenal, I was close to unbeatable on the frozen north. I didn't even need to reach full adulthood. Once I achieved normal time dragon hatchling level abilities, it would be time to leave this wasteland and explore the wider continent, chasing knowledge and the unknown. I curled up on my gem bed and napped peacefully. The cliff nest had a new owner, and everything was quiet. A week later, the blizzard finally stopped. The polar night was fading. The sky was lightening toward that pre-dawn glow. Soon the 6-month daylight period would begin, temperatures would rise slightly, and the frozen north would briefly come alive. I'd been busy during this week. I flew circuits around my new territory, marking the borders with my dragon scent to declare ownership. I moved the ice spirit settlement from the river to the cliff territory. Under my direction, they were building not just homes, but hidden lookout posts and animal pens. I taught them basic farming and breeding knowledge from my past life. I didn't know much, but they were smart enough to figure out the details on their own. The ogre tribe stayed at their valley settlement. I knew better than to put all my forces in one place. A wise dragon keeps multiple dens. Their main job was delivering at least one medium-sized magical creature per week. With the Dragonblood ogres leading hunts, this was a reasonable demand. Standing atop the 1,000-meter ice cliff, I gazed south at the great mountain range stretching like a sleeping dragon across the horizon. What lay beyond those peaks? I'd been asking myself this question more and more often. The frozen north was beautiful but monotonous. The same white landscape in every direction, hardly any variety, barely any life. After 2 years here, I was growing restless. Then I descended to visit the Ice Spirit Village. Roy Ice River had nervously invited me to attend something called the Bango Festival, a traditional celebration held once every 20 years in their tribe. After hearing Roy's explanation, I kept a straight face but was quite surprised on the inside. In simple terms, the Bango Festival was a mass reproduction event for the entire Ice Spirit community. A large-scale group mating ceremony celebrating the birth of new life and hopes for a better future. With a spirit of scholarly curiosity about the customs of different species, I accepted the invitation. I arrived at the Bango Festival grounds. The ice spirits had cleared a circular space over 200 meters across, with all of them gathered around the edges, faces full of excitement. Roy Ice River stood in the center, giving traditional blessings. They built me an ice crystal throne nearby, rough and wild-looking, but shaped to fit a dragon's body. I settled onto it and watched with curiosity, idly playing with my 2 bear cubs using my tail. The little furballs had grown well since the blizzard ended. They'd opened their eyes and bonded with me completely, acting sweet toward me, but fierce toward everyone else. They loved trying to wrestle my tail, getting flipped over again and again, but never giving up. I was genuinely curious about what would happen next. Ice spirits have no gender, no reproductive organs. Their bodies are all solid crystal, and they look nearly identical. How exactly would they reproduce? Bango! Roy shouted, arms raised. Bango! 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 Echoed 100 voices. Then the elemental energy in the area surged. Glowing symbols appeared on the ground beneath them. Fine lines of light appeared on each ice spirit's body, some splitting them roughly in half, others separating smaller portions. The number and size of these lines varied. Those with more splits looked happier. I realized what was happening. They reproduced by splitting themselves. With increasingly excited chanting, the white lines brightened into solid light. Cracking sounds filled the air as their bodies divided along the glowing seams, but without any pain, only joy. The separated pieces quickly absorbed surrounding elemental energy, growing ice crystals that formed into limbs and features, becoming small new ice spirits that slowly opened their eyes. The original spirits regenerated their missing parts almost simultaneously, though their magical aura dimmed noticeably, more so for those who'd split off larger pieces. This weakness was temporary. I could tell from the energy patterns that they'd recover. Self-division using elemental power, I observed. Even as failed creations, they still have the instinct to continue their species. It wasn't the wild scene I'd imagined from the name, but I gained genuine knowledge about how a unique life form reproduces. Worth seeing. Roy approached me afterward, visibly tired but beaming, with 2 newborn ice spirits in tow, blank-faced little things that looked more like living sculptures than intelligent beings. Unlike true dragons, ice spirits can't pass down knowledge at birth. The newborns would need to learn everything from scratch. I noticed they carried a faint dragon blood aura. The transformation had been inherited, saving me the trouble of converting them myself. The newborns looked at me with instinctive fear mixed with an equally instinctive reverence from the dragon blood in their bodies. My bear cubs crawled over to inspect the newcomers, then immediately switched to their tough guy act, growling warnings. The ice spirit babies shrank back, intimidated. How long until these newborns grow to your size? I asked Roy. He started to answer. Only about 1. He never finished. My expression changed sharply, and I shot to my feet, snapping my gaze southward. Every ice spirit turned to follow my stare. The southern sky had turned red. A churning layer of crimson clouds stretched across the horizon like the sky itself was on fire. My 2 bear cubs, normally fearless little bullies, shoved their heads into the snow and trembled like frightened ostriches. I stared south with every nerve on edge. Even from this distance, I could feel the destructive power. Blinding fire-red magical energy dominated my vision like nothing I'd ever sensed before. Someone was casting high-level magic out there. I launched into the sky for a better view. A red orb rose above the southern horizon. It looked small from here, maybe barrel-sized, but given the distance, it was probably hundreds of meters across in reality. Then it detonated. A mushroom cloud of rolling flame erupted upward, shoving aside entire cloud layers. The elemental energy around me went berserk, fire elements nearly boiling, sending visible ripples through the air. Minutes later, a wave of hot wind rolled across my territory. It had traveled so far it couldn't even melt snow anymore, but the fact that it reached me at all proved how terrifyingly powerful the original blast had been. The firestorm lasted over 10 minutes before fading, then took another half hour to fully dissipate. High-level evocation fire spell. Strategic weapon level. I swallowed hard. That kind of attack could devastate everything within kilometers. If I'd been at the center, my body wouldn't have survived. My magic resistance is strong, but has limits at my age. Low-level spells feel like tickling, mid-level can crack my scales, and high-level can kill me. This was exactly why I hadn't left the frozen north yet. Out in the wider world, High-level casters with enough preparation can unleash destruction far beyond what even adult dragons can handle with pure physical strength. The blast probably wasn't aimed at me, but I wasn't taking chances. I warned my servants to stay close to home, then flew to my most hidden location, the underwater den in the small frozen river. As I flew, I ran combat simulations in my head. If I encountered someone at that power level, what could I do? At long range, 5 times speed might let me escape. At close range, I'd be dead. Plunder time breath depends on my age, so its damage is still limited. But time stop. If I could get within 20 meters of even a legendary mage who let their guard down for one moment, I'd have a real chance. Freeze time. Hit them with plunder time breath and the 7th level savage vortex scroll simultaneously. The kill probability would actually be quite high. And in a true life or death emergency, I could use temporal dragon reversal to ask my future self for help. Knowing myself, if a past version of me was genuinely about to die and I could help, I wouldn't refuse, even if the cost was steep. I can't watch myself die, but I couldn't rely on that as a plan. Borrowed time isn't free. It always has to be paid back. I reached the frozen river, dove in with a splash, and swam to my cramped underwater den. The few surviving river sharks, barely a handful left after my feeding frenzy, scattered in terror when they saw me. I didn't spare them a glance. I settled in, closed my eyes, and let myself sink into sleep. A sleeping dragon's presence drops to almost nothing. You could walk right over one and never know. So I'd simply nap and let whatever was happening to the south blow over.